Namaste, everybody. We are back today, and we have Raphael with us. Andreas will be hopefully joining us at some point. We shall see if he's going to make it or not. But how's it going over there, Raphael? You're muted, sir.
Thanks, double mute. I'm fine, Nudge. Thank you. How are you?
Great. How was Christmas? Do you celebrate Christmas?
Yeah, I mean, generally, I guess many in Austria, at least those who are culturally educated as Christians, usually celebrate Christmas. Of course, Catholic, especially, and Protestant. Yeah, I'm not in a particularly religious family, but yeah, we celebrate. It's always very nice. And it's good, I guess, for any family or any type of group, to have any type of fixed dates, even if maybe, as I hear in many families, many, maybe do not get along so perfectly always or whatever, but to have something where, at least to make a conscious attempt, an effort, right, to get along with people, I think is great. And if you already get along, just to have a nice time, I think that's always good and a good idea for most groups and families and friends and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do encourage people to get along with each other as well as that we possibly can. But we know that reality is that we can't get along with everybody, and that's just the reality of the matter. So knowing the difference between whom you can get along with and whom you cannot is part of the process of living life. Fortunately or unfortunately. So, anyways, yeah, I don't know where you've been putting your attention, but I'm sure you've been kind of looking at all the shenanigans that's been happening in 2024. This is almost like a 2024 recap in a way, like about like what we went through, and we went through a lot in 2024. So, where do you want to start?
It's a good question. I was honestly just collecting like the last few things I found in regards to the TFE. So I wasn't expecting like a whole year review now. There's so many things, honestly, like chronologically, I'm not sure where I would want to start. Do you have anything in mind? What happened this year? I
No, no,
wouldn't
no.
even know.
Let's go with what you've been collecting, and let's just talk about what's on hand first, and let's go with that. So, what's been your perspective? What has been your thoughts on the whole matter? What have you been seeing unfolding? You know, and do you consider yourself a flat earther or a level earther? I mean, I think people would also like to know a little bit about that, though, too.
Of course. So I would say did never have a particularly, I want to say, strong stance on the topic, but maybe that's not even correct. How I approached it basically is I've been into many different quote unquote conspiracies, both in the personal experiences and just researching things, realizing even though you want everyone to always be nice and honest and so on, there is deception, people are lying to you, right? There are so-called conspiracies, which just means, people doing something behind your back and not telling others in order to trick them or gain advantage. And then I guess it was in about 2015, 16, something like that, that a friend simply pointed out to me, oh, did you ever see the NASA astronauts training in underwater? And I had never really looked even into the moon landing, I think. Or maybe the moon landing I did, but not much more, or something like that, or I wasn't much aware of it. And then just a friend gave me some hints. And then I was like, okay, now that I see that, I have to take really a very close look at NASA. And then it just became very obvious that you cannot trust them at all. And since they are pushing a certain model, and also with the little bit I can understand in terms of physics or whatever else, and perspective and engineering or whatever there could be, it just doesn't match up at all. Besides the fact, of course, that we know NASA themselves has at least certain research documents where they say we are assuming a flat, stationary, non-rotating Earth, I think is the proper
Yeah,
term, right?
yeah.
So my stance basically is I don't want to have a model where I'm completely being lied to. I don't honestly actually care if in the end we realize, it's a 25-sided pyramid or something. I'm okay with
Mhm.
it, but I'm just not, just gonna believe some, whether CGI or whether someone proposing models and claim that this is what they do, but at the same time they themselves use something completely different. These are just obvious logical things. I'm like, I'm not going to go along with something that seems obviously obfuscated, forged, changed, whatever else. And I'm open to the possibility as to what it then could really be. Although I also have to say, in terms of my individual perception, the little bit that I think I can, see with my own eyes and so on, I would also have to say, in a sense, I'm also still looking for the curve in a way, So
That elusive curve. I mean, you got to look faster. You got to look harder for that elusive curve. But the thing is, Raphael, that we did have flat earthers and globe earthers go down to Antarctica, and they saw the 24-hour sun allegedly, and so that should be enough for your average individual to say that the Earth is a globe. So, I mean, do you have any problems with that? I mean, do you have any
yeah, I
issues with that?
have to be a little dumb if I'm not accepting if a few people go somewhere, they bring back some footage and make some claims, I should just believe them, right? I mean, actually similar with the moon landing or whatever it is, right? Yeah, this is obviously how it's being set up, because apparently, unfortunately, also in so-called, let's use the word, truther communities, or people that maybe are on the path to learn something and to wake up, much too often, as you also spoke about on your shows, it's about personalities. Much too often, it's about feelings in a sense. And while it is an important factor, and maybe unfortunately also today a little bit we'll talk about that, so you cannot completely divorce the content from the messenger. I understand that. And it is an important heuristic in many cases, for sure. And I also use it. However, at the same time, at least as much as anyone can for themselves, should try to look at information itself as individually, objectively as possible. Maybe still compare what certain people say about it, but still, as much as you can, try to understand whatever basic principle of perspectives, of how shadows move, or whatever else you think you can understand. Because only then, when you have some base knowledge for yourself, for example, I'm imagining myself to have some very basic knowledge about health. So then if someone would talk something and I notice that in this topic they're saying something completely opposite, which appears completely insane to me, at least I have some type of independent information I could go back to. Or what Andreas would be telling you now, for example, is, because we spoke about it yesterday briefly in preparation, we'll see if he shows up, but he has some experience with NASA, for example, and he would just tell you, well, I know that NASA is presenting many different models and ideas that simply do not hold up in reality, or they internally are using models which are not the models or ideas that they are externally proposing. And here things are changing, and it's just obvious that NASA is either deceiving or however else you want to put it, right? But so what I just want to go back to is the point that, again, you're never left off the hook of your own discernment. And again, while it is important to discern whom you can trust to certain extents, it is equally important to, as much as possible, build up some knowledge on your own, or some experience, or just, go to whatever Utah, where it is you see a large flat surface, whatever you need, right?
Mm.
Um, so that you're not only dependent on a hearsay thing and on a popularity and personality contest idea, which is not, what I guess truth is about. Because how many examples does everyone in chat know where 95% claim one thing, and yet it turned out that the 5%, which were deemed crazy, maybe at least had an important contribution that the others were completely ignorant about, to put it mildly, right?
Well, but the reality is based on consensus, though. I mean, like if 95% of the population believe that the reality is this way, I mean, it's about democracy. We vote, and 95% of the population voted the Earth is a globe, and thus it must be right. And then you also can say the same thing about history. Vast majority of people can talk about ancient Greece and ancient Romans and ancient Egypt and whatever, ancient Mesopotamia, and the vast majority of people believe that to exist. So, the 5% of the population shouldn't have a say because, we gotta use the democratic method to determine what reality is, right?
Right. Which is another one of my most favorite brainwash ideas, because aside from going into the whole idea of about what is a constitution, or what is a constitution really? What is a democracy and what is a republic? Just on the face of it, I hope to many people listening, it is obvious that the idea of the 51% majority ruling or deciding anything is not exactly the most, shall I say, peaceful way to come to a decision or agreement. And it's actually, I think, one of the things which people have been instilled into, especially in the West, and are so often made to believe that certain majorities are deciding or thinking something. In many cases, it may even be true because, of course, this is what they got educated in. This is what they continually got brainwashed into, no matter which topic it is. Yeah, it's
What's
yeah.
that?
Please go on. I'll continue my point.
Yeah, sorry, I had, Sally walk across me, and I didn't wanna
Okay.
push her
The
away,
cat,
but,
the cat, the cat is disturbing. No, it's okay. So, how should I want to put it? Yeah, there is, you only have these 5%, but yeah, what I want to say is it's not, sometimes you really have majorities where you could say, maybe make a vote now. The majority maybe would say the Earth is a globe, let's say, and they believe NASA. But also here, what's often overlooked is very often I think it is only an apparent majority that is created. Just as you know, in the democratic process for real, how many people really are allowed or eligible to vote? We could ask the same about how many people are eligible to even made up their mind about what the shape of the Earth could be or have even considered it. And then how many people actually go to vote? Like if we talk about, voting in
yeah.
democracy, and then there's a
Mhm.
hundred more steps, how the apparent majority or apparent weight of preponderance of evidence or whatever you say gets framed. So I also think that very oftentimes these apparent majorities are only apparent, and are not maybe
Yeah,
even real, or you would not even have, for example, or most likely, you would not find 90 or 95% of, let's say, zealous globe crusaders. Most likely not. Most likely there are maybe
yeah,
5% and only 70% that didn't think of it too much and
right,
wouldn't even maybe put up a big fight if it was a thing, but would just be like, okay, let's talk about it. I don't know, let's see, and would probably be much more open-minded than what we are presented with, of course, online, for example, but which takes up
yeah,
all the PR space and the perception of it. And this could happen on both sides, both, of course, for the Globe Crusaders, and the same thing for, I'll use the term deliberately now, Flat Crusaders, which we also have now self-styled, right? So,
mhm.
yeah, it's like
Yeah,
they take up the PR space, the PR, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, I do wonder about, like, because, like, like they have, if they highlight a certain topic, whatever it might be, and they have a big vocal about it, and it could be the 5% who is talking loudly about it, but because it's like presented over and over again on mainstream media, and it's presented on the news of all things. One second. Ah, this cat got stuck on a cord over here, but so that's the reason why it seems there's an appearance of this kind of like, wow, it's like a major force, but all these mainstream media, they're owned by the same companies, so like, and they're going to repeat the same nonsense over and over again. So let's kind of get into the TFE. What has been your observation about the TFE over the months? And you've been watching my channel, and obviously you've been kind of keeping up with all the information that's been presented over here and other places as well. So, what is your
Yes,
um,
I've been trying to keep up with the flat Earth and globe Earth Kardashians.
yes,
um, so there's so many things. Would you want to like start with a frame, like how we want to approach it? I made like a list of all the things I
yeah,
think are strange.
do whatever you want. You
All right.
present it in a
So,
way that makes sense to you.
okay. All right. I'll do the best I can right here. So what I would start with, and I really actually would prefer not to have to even talk about individuals or something.
Yeah.
And I really, as I mentioned initially, I would love everyone just to be honest, to be nice, to be as they present themselves. Everyone has
Hmm.
issues, everyone has, maybe presents themselves a bit differently. That's normal. But what I'm talking about is not in terms of actively, deliberately deceiving something. either in terms of who someone presents themselves to be as a personality, or what they claim to believe or claim to know, right? Here we're going into the realm of deception. And who do I
Hmm.
have to bring up first? First, of course, your favorite individual by the name of Will Duffy, who is the
Hmm.
self-styled pastor and organizer of this experiment. What I have heard, I'll just briefly drop it here. I didn't see the results of it yet, but there is a guy by the name of Fake Flip, if you've seen him. He's, I believe, a Brazilian. And I just saw a video
Okay.
of him like a week ago where he kind of said he knows supposedly who had the real idea for this experiment or something like this. I'll have to check him out more and see what he's saying now. The channel is called Fake Flip. So that could be something interesting. But anyways, what many people know by now, and it's not nothing new, but I would like to reiterate it, is just the idea that if I'm very conservative in the statements I want to make about this supposed experiment, I would simply say it really does appear as if there are certain actors, including the main organizer and maybe more, that are simply not acting in what they would call good faith. And that would then be, I guess, bad faith, which is especially funny if you are claiming yourself to be a pastor and at the same time have clips of your sermons running around. And even if it is not with 100% context, but still, of course, as a, what would it be? A priest or a pastor? What is the right term? I'm sure
Yeah.
you've seen the clip, whereas, how should I say? It is relativized whether something can be seen as a deception or not. Or let's
Yeah.
put it
Yeah.
differently, the Bible, if I recount this correctly as to what Will Duffy says, does not prohibit deception, but it only prohibits bearing false witness against your neighbor, whatever exactly this differentiation is supposed to be, and who then is supposed to be your neighbor or not. You know, I'm sure people can get very creative with these interpretations as to when the deception applies or not, especially also because I believe Dubay eventually brought it out, but I know UNZ brought it out, synthetic astrology from Lady Blunt. I'm just mentioning this because this means that there clearly was well known a model or an idea which would work with a model of a level Earth, if that is the right term, which would include the possibility for a 24-hour sun in Antarctica already 100
Hmm.
years ago in one of these cool, old style books. And from everything I can understand, this information was deliberately 100% ignored by the main organizers of TFE, which is in itself curious. Why would you do that? If I'm really honest and looking for all the information and want to present everything, then I would bring that up. And the correct thing then would have been, even at least a month before that, to be like, oh, hey guys, I'm Will Duffy. I'm so excited for it. And by the way, did you know that, there is actually this book about flat Earth and they have this model as well? How interesting. Shouldn't we investigate this further and maybe devise more tests or whatever? Yeah. That
Hmm. Hmm.
would be the good faith approach, if you ask me. And here you can also see what I mentioned earlier in terms of what is the perceived notion and what is the real level of information available. Because here then, even though maybe Dubai is big, so I guess many people kind of caught wind of it, but still it's kind of like this personality PR game with certain actors, maybe like Will Duffy. I think he never mentioned Lady Blunt, or did he? Because I don't want to say something wrong now. But I don't think he ever said, actually, guys, there is a flat Earth model that accounts for it. Because if he would know that, or sorry, if he would communicate that knowledge, he would not come out after the experiment where they claim, observation, they've seen a 24-hour sun. He would not come out and say the flat Earth position is not tenable anymore. He could not say that if he would communicate the fact that there is a model, including a level Earth with a 24-hour sun in Antarctica by Lady Blunt from synthetic astrology. Do you see what I'm saying logically here?
Yeah, but I think they did actually go through Zetetic astronomy over at either Globebuster or Jeranism's channel, and I'm going to mention names anyway. You don't have to mention any names. I don't think they put a lot of credence to it. I have seen people say that, well, it's a 100-year-old book, and it could have been put out by the controllers themselves. So how can we put any faith in that as an example? And we also get into the fact that there's kind of backdating. So do we actually know that it's like a 100-year-old or 120-year-old book, et cetera, et cetera? So there are a lot of questions about the legitimacy about that information though too. So nobody really took it seriously, other than Z and myself.
No, because the thing is, what I want to say, and this is the other part of it, or a big part of it, which is the question: what would have satisfied the requirements of so-called flat earthers or whatever realistically? For example, things like a full 24-hour live stream, or a full continuous stream, or at least recording of, for example, them going from the hotel nonstop up to the point where they, I don't know, arrive or set up their equipment or whatever else. Why am I mentioning this? Because I had the impression that the whole idea of making a proper video production, at least officially, was only communicated a few months prior to the start. I remember a
Hmm.
video
Hmm.
from Will Duffy like 3-4 months ago. Like, yeah, I've been thinking, and actually, Jaron and cameras, yeah, we could actually like stream. It seemed to me as if it's deliberately, I'm sorry, playing dumb and
Hmm.
pretending as if only a few months before the event, well, actually, should we maybe care about some like technical equipment and stuff?
Yeah.
I'm like, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, and even here the idea, which was also apparently referred by Karen B, which I find equally strange, again, this popularity contest idea, whereas
Hmm.
it is apparent also maybe in Will Duffy's mind to some extent. If you think like that, maybe that's honestly what he thought, was like, well, I'm just gonna get the most popular guys in the schoolyard, and if they
Hmm.
come back and they say it, well, that's gotta be it. Which of course is
Hmm.
not, we talk about scientific or not, but I mean, isn't it obvious that I want to bring back as much proof, let's say, as possible? And first, I want to field, of course, if I say basically I want to put the flat earth to rest and all these people delete your channel, well,
Hmm.
wouldn't I naturally then first go to them and be like, okay, metaphorically speaking, I want to kill your channel. What do I have to do to kill your channel? And then they have to ask people like whoever they think is popular and important, let's say Austin or whatever, and then say, okay, give me the requirements, what you would need, that you would be convinced, and not just go there and then somehow think that the random popular guys through hearsay should convince anybody. And we'll get into
Yeah.
the footage in a moment, which exists, but has so many questions. So that's also
Hmm.
something where it seems to me it is done either it's unprofessional, which I don't believe it is, or underfunded,
Hmm.
which I don't believe it is. So that just
Hmm.
means there is some sort of bad faith or deliberate leaving out of information. And then simply by not allowing it to bubble up further or mentioning it, something like Lady Blunt, even if the book is fake, it doesn't even matter. The point is,
Mm.
if I'm intellectually honest, then I'm listing all the possibilities and all the ideas, and we go in with all the information available to all sides and the public. So we can understand what would be the requirements, maybe even different requirements. It doesn't matter. But then I'm striving to achieve those and not come back with whatever random, very strange footage. Uh,
Mm.
so
Mhm.
uh, uh, you see what I'm saying? So if I only approach this
Mhm.
logically, and if this would be my goal, yeah, then I would try to be much more thorough from the start.
Mhm.
And that's very strange, and again makes it seem to me more like a PR op, which may also be why eventually the organizer, Will Duffy, had no problem to allow for final edit and so on. Because if you just need the 30-second, how do you call it, from the hip, where you have a guy saying, oh, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. Well, obviously that's enough for Le Parisien and wherever else it was, and immediately had 1 million views on the first day it was released, right? So don't need any final edits, um,
But how dare you? How dare you, Raphael, to be questioning the top flat earthers? I mean, they are trustworthy. We know we can trust them. They know they can trust themselves, and that's the reason why they're in the positions that they are, is because of their authenticity and trust. And nobody should be questioning who they are and what they're about at all. And for you to question them as a non-flat earther has never been a part of the flat Earth community, you're just a hater, Raphael. Okay.
yeah, I mean that's what I'm known for, I guess. So yeah, yeah, it's interesting, and of course, what you also mentioned last show, the whole parasocial aspect, again, understandable to an extent. Again, in the best case, something positive if certain people maybe not only parasocial, but really get to talk to people more backstage, get to know them, get to understand them. That can be a great and very positive thing. However, if it then turns into blind loyalty for whatever reason, or how do you call it, idol worship, to go back to our favorite topic, then we're besides the point. Because obviously it's not about any messenger, even though again they have a place, but primarily should be about, okay, dear messenger, are you what you're saying correct or not? And depending on whether it's correct or not, I will support you in that moment, or I will ask you maybe to look again, or whatever it is,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, what it really comes down to, if we were to just kind of make it as simple as possible, is that we don't need to trust anybody. I don't have to come here and tell you guys, oh, you can just trust me. And I'm telling you, there's all these books that exist. I've read them. Right. And then you can just trust me that the information is there regarding whatever that I'm presenting here. No, you can go read those books yourself. I can present those books and put it in the face of you, right? In front of your face and be like, okay, this is what is read. You can interpret it in whichever way that you want. Same thing with the final experiment is that there is a kind of a logic behind it. And we already have a position. It's a false dichotomy. So what? Then you being a participant of a false dichotomy does what? You discredit yourself by having participated in a false dichotomy. Now, the question then is, did you know that it was a false dichotomy before you went or not, before you accepted the terms and conditions of the false dichotomy? That's where the issue is. Now, if you are going to play the role of the ignoramus and say, oh, well, I couldn't have possibly known that it was a false dichotomy, then you are not qualified as a representative of anything. That's the problem, right? Go ahead.
Precisely correct. Exactly my thoughts. Again, being thorough. So both on the organizer side and in this case on the, let's say, flat earth representative side. Exactly my thoughts. Um, and I honestly do not really believe. I mean, these guys are streaming and on video and everything every day. So I don't think it didn't cross their mind when they first heard it. Well,
Oh, yeah.
actually, as a flat earther or knowing all these, again, I use a term used by someone else, conspiratard flat earthers. Well, if I know they are like that, then I should know they have a very high bar of requirement to accept anything, right? They're known for that, right? Because the crazy ones that dare to question the globe. So they need very high quality proof. That would be a very logical understanding. So immediately I would engineer everything to achieve that very high standard of proof, as detailed and so on as possible. But they didn't really care about that. Maybe because they knew that ultimately this is one of my ideas, not only my ideas, of course, I heard it from many others, that the so-called flat earth community, or those that are critical, maybe simply are not their main audience, actually. And that they have simply an audience that go about hearsay, and they just hear, oh, the very popular flat earth guys, they're confused also, or they're just dumb. We know it's the globe anyways, Probably for many of them, that is enough information, and that's how it's being played. Although I also have to say what I find funny, that Duffy then did this video about flat earth to rest and claimed like, yeah, I got this message from a former flat earther, and he says he's now convinced, and I got another message, and then I got another message. And I was like, I know only from your Le Parisien first day thing was like 500,000, if I remember correctly. There's probably a lot more from some of these main outlets. And like, I'm sorry, TFE, I'm not sure if your conversion rate, as they call it, is very high. You know what I mean? Because I can easily
Well, I mean,
take a few examples, but I mean, unless he's coming out with like, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of testimony,
mm,
I'm not
yeah.
really sure if you even achieved your goal. Again, maybe the flat earthers are not the main audience. Maybe some on the fence are, and maybe for others it's just edification of the existing belief system or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, so I'm not sure if the return on investment ultimately will turn out to be what they hoped, let's say, in terms of shaping belief systems, shaping discussion, shaping inability to want to go and see things for yourself, but trust in hearsay, right? I'm not sure overall if they will succeed. Also, because you have some of these guys, there we have live and direct, Andreas.
I'm sorry I'm late. I forgot. That's the bad excuse. But I'll be home in a minute. I just wanted to check in with you guys and make sure you're having a good time.
Yeah. Why is it dark over there? Oh, it's freaking nighttime. It's
Yeah,
like what?
it becomes dark here around 4 p.m. To be honest, usually it's
Holy shit.
dark a few
Okay.
hours before Raphael wakes up. He just wants to make sure that everyone does all the, we're testing out the day for him, make sure that it's okay, and he gets in the pool after.
Okay. All right. Well, join us when you get home, and thanks for checking in.
All right,
And
I'll see
we'll
you
see
guys
you
about
soon.
10 minutes.
All right. Take your time. Uh,
So
yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
the last thing I'm just saying is what's also interesting and which may ultimately be good, even though I would never dare, in a sense, to take their strong stance, and also because I believe I know too much. King Nico, for example, recently popped up, as I'm sure you noticed, and he seems very convinced of his, again, I guess, model. Maybe even he
Yeah.
would agree, his model, which I can respect in a way. I wouldn't do that also because we both learned quite a few things about the Bible and so on.
Mm,
Which just put more questions. However, still, even just the fact that he is so convinced, and in a way, how do you call it, throwing everything against the wall and seeing what sticks. I'm not even
mhm,
saying that's exactly what he's doing, but even just the fact that now there really are many people very closely looking at it, even if they have a preconceived notion about what it should be, just the fact that they have, let's say, strong fervor, let me say, to very discreetly and correctly analyze everything and dissect everything, is very good. And anyhow, this is how it should be done. And in the same time, I would be surprised if the TFA organizers or whoever else did not expect that. That's the other thing. I'm wondering a little bit, did they hope or think that all the people that do any research just are too dumb, or they will not get any voice at all anyways, or what was their game plan? Because if in the end, aside of course, which we always have to come back to, the whole thing being a false dichotomy, if there is any other thing discerned within the footage, anything doctored at all, anything strange at all, anything in any way, shape, or form manipulated, anyone in any way, shape, or form manipulated, and there is any definite proof for any of those things I just mentioned, I mean, good night.
yeah. Well, and here's the thing. I mean, like people can get on a bandwagon real quick. It's all real to all fake, kind of the two extreme positions, and that's where the dichotomies start. And I have to think partially that that is done kind of deliberately. I am putting myself in a position where they went to Antarctica and they actually did film the 24-hour sun. But at the same time, they could have done some shenanigans over there to make it seem like there's some, chicanery that's happening, some like deception that's happening. So you have that kind of polarizing optics. On one hand, it's real. On the other hand, people are latching on to this idea of the fake shit. And then it you have to really be on board. So like to me, it's a kind of a distraction tactic in a way. It's not about the fact, the fallacy of the what's happening in the sky to tell you what the ground is doing. It has nothing to do with that at all. And the whole it has everything to do with like chills and who's involved and all this, like, so the conversations start to automatically go in that direction, and it's like a flow of consciousness and attention that is taking everybody. And even if you're like, oh, I don't want to fucking go in that direction with everybody because it's like the bandwagon, that's where the trend is happening, you almost cannot avoid the topic itself. You have to talk about it. You have to address it in some degree. And more you address it, more relevance that you put into the TFE, real or fake or whatever, but you don't actually end up talking about what is actual, what is objective, what is observable, and that could be a part of the play as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it's obvious there is a deliberate disfunneling, and it may happen on many different thresholds, but certainly the very first one, which you called out from the very start, and many others also have called out, is this false dichotomy idea. And that is never, Will Duffy is never really talking about that. Or I think he was talking in some strange ways, but he's never, let's say, admitting to that the whole setup is faulty. we never go there. It's always within this assumption, and then you add more assumptions, and then, like you say, there is this funnel of conversation and consciousness, which in itself may just overall seem like two opposing forces fighting, but still overall, let's say they're going to the left side, when actually the more interesting thing is to the right side, but there is no discussion going there because over there the dogs are fighting, right? So everyone is like, oh, look.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
that's always something to consider and to be particularly wary about. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And also, like just kind of like I don't disagree with people asking questions. I think it's great to question everything. Question me, question Raphael, question the TFE, question Will Duffy, question Jaron, question Whitsit, question Lisbeth, question everything, question the mountains, question the Vape-gate, question, but just jumping to conclusions. Well, obviously everybody's an adult, but it's ultimately you're gonna, stick your neck out for something that becomes a nothing burger, and then you're gonna later on find out that you kind of messed up, and then you're gonna have to backtrack a little bit and put out, like a disclaimer that you kind of messed up big time, and then got everybody. It's like, wolf who cried wolf. It's just like, hey, wolf, everybody, wolf. Yeah, you do that enough time, people are gonna be like, not sure about that, right?
And what's pretty clear, I think, or clear, I I give them the, how should I say, the genius or the thought to it, that it very much seems as if, at least already with the false dichotomy, but even further potentially with this whole chroma key thing and maybe some other things, it may well be that so-called red herrings or whatever have been deliberately laid out and may be continued to be laid out. From what I
Hmm.
understand, Duffy announced there will be 15 videos, which he's now expecting flat earthers to respond, which is another game, of course, trying to get into the proper conversational position, however you call it, dialectic, whatever else, to be able to direct the flow of conversation, let's say, and bring
Oh
people
yeah.
into a reactive state. That's apparently what he's now trying to do. And of course, he has to press on, because you never are allowed to look back, because when you look back, there's the false dichotomy staring in your face, which makes the whole thing crumble anyways. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that seems to be his strategy right now. Um,
Yeah, and real quick, it's just that Will Duffy is throwing down the gauntlet. He says that if you cannot address the 15 experiments that's presented, you have to delete your channel. You're going to be canceled. Nobody should look at you. You're discredited. Yada yada yada. So then we have to kind of go back again, because like there's a road that brought us here to this position.
how
Like
Christian
collectively
is
wise.
that? Sorry.
Yeah, well, it's but again, this is a guy who is saying that it is okay to deceive. It is okay to lie. There's nothing inherently immoral about lying and deceiving. And he looked very, very thoroughly and deeply into the Bible, and he have come to that conclusion. That's very fascinating. And we should trust people by what they say. We should trust the tree based on the kind of fruit that it bears.
Yes. Yes. Hmm.
Yeah.
That's
All
even
right.
how the
So
experiment is set up. Yes, completely. Yeah.
yes.
Trust in
Yep.
what people say. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and how they present themselves. So let's continue with the presentation. So, what do you got for us? What have you compiled for us today, so we can start talking about it? And we're waiting for
Yes.
Andreas. I'm sure he's going to join us shortly, everybody. So,
Yes, I actually think these could be cool things to also talk about with him, because he may have some, let's say, technical knowledge regarding certain of these things.
mhm.
Um, if you would like, we could also just maybe play another song. Maybe Andreas will be
Oh yeah.
back by then, and then we come back together with him. Let's try for that.
Okay. Yeah, let's go for that, everybody. So we're gonna come right back, and we're gonna play a little bit of a song, and we're gonna wait for Andreas, and he's gonna join us in a bit. Okay. All right, welcome back, everybody, and we are still waiting on Andreas. He will be joining us shortly. Until that time, we're gonna kind of, I don't know, filibuster a little bit.
Yeah. So, how should I say? Let me maybe put it like this, because I'm not sure. Maybe you talked little bit about it with Z, and only to the extent that you want, because you have monologued about it. But at this current point, for you, what maybe would be the summary, or put in a different way, because we briefly spoke about this before the show. How would you say, what is the next stage going on now, or what is the shifting of gears? How do you see, let's say, the field? And what do you think is going on in terms of who is preparing what or who is acting in what way? And then later, when Andreas comes, we'll talk about through the different particular points that we got.
Yeah, I'll be very frank about it. Like I think right now it is the damage control stage. Okay. So the damage has been done and people's reputation's been kind of hurt. And I show reasons as to why. Vape-gate, as an example, potentially I say only now potentially somebody like Witsit pretending to be this Matt Globy, calling in and actually saying that he supports Witsit and all that kind of stuff. It's like really insane what that is. Okay, so all of that to me is damage control. Like Jaren never acknowledging that he is putting himself into the category of the people whom he was calling retarded when they and then now he's taking the same position as the people like myself and Z, where you will see the 24-hour sun, but the Earth is still flat. But now the whole time he was saying that well, the Earth cannot possibly be flat, and then like for months and months and months, so people who were like riding on his coattails and was listening to Jaren, and for months and months they're like just kind of like going along. It's like, oh yeah, 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 that all makes sense, whatever that you're saying. You guys are also culpable for all that though too. You bought the lie and people are not coming correct. So there's like damage control where reputation needs to be salvaged. Okay. So that they can continue on being a quote unquote a representative of the flat earth community, and have the be the biggest names within the community. Because if you lose your reputation, everybody's going to come and attack you and basically throw you under the bus because that's what you deserve. And they will put somebody else up there who deserve to be in that position. That's it. That's the bottom line. So right now it's the damage control. But while the damage control is happening over on the flat earth side of things, Will Duffy is moving forward. He has already did the AP thing. The globe has been vindicated, right? There is a 24-hour sun in Antarctica, and then they're going to push that even further and make it into a production. That is what I think is happening now.
Yeah, that is kind of what it does look like. And I think it is important, like you say, also to differentiate, like what are those people doing that are interested in it because it is their passion, they're passionate about it, they discovered something, they want to know about the shape of the earth, they want to know if there's more land or if it can't be because it wouldn't be biblical or whatever else, right? But to really differentiate that group from like the public and the mainstream, and that those really are different target groups. They have different, let's say, internal cycles, different capacities, and also, especially, of course, considering that it very much appears so as if the final experiment has very good PR connections also to major news outlets, which, maybe the most fervent or interesting Earth-shaped researchers that don't trust NASA most likely do not have. So there is obviously, of course, a power imbalance, let's say, only from that point of view. And we're kind of like, playing different games simultaneously. They do interact, but yeah, let's say maybe not in a direct way. So that makes it a little bit more tricky because, of course, the flat earthers or whoever within the flat earth community, even who maybe is not so popular, does not have the chance, of course, to even broadcast an important message. Maybe, and I'll just assume this, for example, because I heard you talk about it with the upward vector, they don't have access to AP to be like, oh, by the way, press release, everyone, did you consider this and this experiments? Please take a look, So it's a much different game, like to even gain traction for an idea, just like you said with Lady Blunt, that then even by the supposed sages or whoever is the arbiter, which shouldn't exist anyway in this way, right? But even discern or decide then whether any evidence is even relevant and will be properly accounted for or not. So, yeah.
Yeah, look, like we are talking about psychological operation at the highest scale at this point. I mean, we're talking about them, whomever they are, deceiving you to the point of skewing reality itself, you know? And then they're talking about diffraction and refraction and scaling and whatever, whatever, whatever. And it's a constant, like, radio program that is being played on you all the time. It's like a TV, the news, and the radio always constantly reminding you that Earth is a globe. Earth is a globe. This is the reason why the Earth is a globe. This little innocuous, or maybe that's not the right word, like insignificant tidbit you cannot confirm nor deny is the proof. And you're just a regular Joe guy, and you're just too dumb to understand it. But you better just accept somebody's authority, right? Because they're a pastor, they're a scientist, they're an architect or whatever. They work for NASA. They're an astrophysicist, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, as an example. I mean, they're geniuses. There's somebody's got 160 IQ, so we better just submit to their rationale about things, right?
So
That's
just
how
within
it
this
works.
framework, I'm really wondering where the term bending a mind or warping a mind is coming from. Because these, I mean, bending, obviously, what do you bend? Maybe something that formerly was straight,
Space
right?
and time, space and time, you bend.
Exactly. And warp, I mean, warping can mean, like disfiguring. Also, warp is like with Star Trek and so on, and just a term,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And warping a mind, bending a mind, I'm just wondering if maybe these terms itself are somehow associated with that psychological operation long time ago, that this is literally what's happening, just as you're saying. And that's the other thing that I realized when I looked more into it and just realized, okay, whatever the NASA astronauts are showing are fake, and all these 666s everywhere, it looks like a big PR ritual rather than a real scientific company. And they never try to explain to me what all the buttons in the ISS do, because they don't do anything, right? So all these questions stacking up over time. And yeah, there was a point I wanted to make,
but
which I
but
lost
they
now.
light up, Raphael. If you poke the
Yeah,
buttons, they light up. I mean, they do light up. And
it
they
is like
and when you
Disney
poke,
again.
yeah, they
It's like
unlight and they light
suspension.
up.
Yeah, it's like suspension of disbelief. It's just like if you would see a, Star Trek or whatever, and again you see the lights, and yeah, they light up. That's why it must be doing what they say it's doing. It is amazing. But again, suspension of disbelief, just as they would require you to have suspension of disbelief when the NASA astronauts are talking with the kindergartners and there is no delay in the radio communication, all of that. Of course they have quantum tech probably. And just in the same way, there must be a certain suspension of disbelief when you look at any footage, I guess, because we know by now how great film technology is. We've all seen, the best, most advanced movies and the most advanced techniques that are available. But then if I'm watching any movie, like a blockbuster movie or something, I must have this suspension of disbelief to actually believe the story. And this is always the buffer, or how should I say, the distance we have to be aware of. How much do I need to suspend my disbelief in order to be able to wholesale buy the narrative they are giving me along with the footage or the movie they are presenting? And in this way, I would encourage everyone to look at this also just like a movie production, because even if everything they're showing is perfectly real, it still is a framed production from a false dichotomy to achieve a certain output, right? And a certain suspension of disbelief is required, that you would just say, yeah, I'm 100% sure you did exactly what you said you did, because they will release more footage now, and I'm very curious to see what this will bring. But so far it does not seem to me as they will in any way, shape or form achieve anything close to a even 80% proofing in terms of showing all the relevant things. Like I said, it seems deliberately to be set up in a half-baked way, and then like you said, just push people, pull off the gloves, and like try to bring them in the stressed position, so none of the people remember, well, actually, number one, false dichotomy, number two, let's look at whatever basic things, and not get confused by, I'm not sure how to say, this kind of herding. It's a type of herding. If you tell people, oh, now you have to do this, and now if you don't do this, delete your channel. I mean,
Right.
who is this guy to say any of that?
Well, I mean, like it's ultimately about credibility. That's what it comes down to. Is that some people have credibility because of this and this. It's they put themselves in an authoritative position. for whatever reason. And then so everybody is coming from a position. It's like, well, that guy is lying and that guy is disingenuous, and that is because of this and this and this reason, right? So reputation and optics of reputation play a big role. I mean, that's how politics work. All these, politics work the same way of like, well, that guy is completely discredited because he was involved in this scandal, yada, yada, yada. And these people were involved in the scandal. And then it's like, whole maze of like, who's involved and how they were involved. And like a regular individual have to spend like hours to go through it and determine for themselves. But all you get is like little snippets of, yeah, apparently it's true that these people were involved, but this is how much they were involved. But like nobody can really get to the bottom of it because you are just conflated with so much stuff. Same with the whole TFE and the flat Earth versus the globe. You have so much information. You're deluged under the this information, psychological operation, and people definitely have to feel like they have to follow some authority because they're the ones that you can trust to really distill that information and give you the pure truth. And somebody like Will Duffy is putting himself in that kind of a position where he is a pastor, he's a millionaire, he has done the experiments, yada yada yada. So he put himself in a position where you can trust him, right?
Yeah, and again here I guess there is I mean, at least for some, the split in terms of how discerning they are, I would say, or even just how they're what journey they went through. Because if you tell me, oh, there's a millionaire pastor saying something, for me that's not giving plus points if I hear it just like that, right? But of course for a general public maybe it still does, or at least that's the target group they're aiming for, I guess. Because what I want to say, like, if you know about different conspiracies here and there, then millionaire priester is not necessarily the first thing where you say, oh, that must be the most trustworthy. Maybe I'd rather think of, prosperity gospel or whatever else. Or then the idea of financial advisor. Well, that can mean anything. That can be something good or it can be something very strange. So even here, I'm a little bit surprised by how the people react, or you can clearly see they seem to react differently. And I'm not exactly sure where Will Duffy has got his, let's say, initial, I want to say, globe following from. Maybe from his church, like inherited, maybe through the shows somehow. But it seems for them, he certainly is a great authority. Basically, what I want to say to people that have done more research, this wouldn't be seen as an authority anyway. So, yeah. But this is why,
Well,
of course, the idea was to rope in the most popular flat earthers and then add their credibility to it. And then, of course, you make it a whole thing. And this is then how Karen B can say, oh, didn't you see? Like, these guys went from both camps. And that kind of means this has to be legit.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, but they could have been roped or doped in. They could have been programmed. We don't know. It's all speculation about like how they were involved, what kind of motivation, what kind of buttons were pressed for all that. All we know is that they were involved. That's all we know. And another fact of the matter is that before Will Duffy, there's Bob Enyard, and I've shown to people about Bob Enyard. And Bob Enyard basically came out in 2018, and he was doing a GoFundMe to send a flat earther to space, right? So he wanted to come up with like hundred and some $1,000 trip. I think it was even $250,000. I don't remember. It was ridiculous amount of money to send a flat earther to space. They raised like 30 some thousand. They said, well, if we're going to get enough money to send a flat earther to space, and if we have any extra money left, we're going to give telescopes to students and shit like that. What I mean? So there was and then in their radio program, Bob Enyart Live, they invited professors to talk about how flat earth conspiracy is taking off and it's fallacious and blah blah blah, and we know all the reasons as to why it's not flat. Same talking points as we've heard for years and years and years. So like the question that I had for Will Duffy is like, did he know about that or not? And he said, well, no, I haven't been in contact with Bob Enyard. I was living down in Puerto Rico. I was doing my financial thing, so I wasn't aware of that. It only dawned on me back in 2022 or 2021 that there were actually flat earthers that exist, and they're serious people. So I had to come to know myself what the reality of this world was, right? Cool
Yeah,
story,
and this
bro.
is Yeah, exactly. And especially if you are in good relationship with someone, is it really that likely that if they start a program to send someone to space, you will really not hear of it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's only wrong if you're bearing false witness against your neighbor. And maybe someone is not someone's neighbor, so it's okay to deceive them. I don't know how this works in this
Yeah.
logic, right?
Yeah. All right, we've been waiting for Andreas for enough time now. I think we can just kind of get going, and he can join us because this is
Yes.
borderlining to the point of I think I'm not sure. Like I'm sure it was an accident, but I was looking forward to having him on. But
Oh no, definitely,
let
definitely. So what we have and what you actually just mentioned right now. So let's see. So we go through it one by one. Of course, I mean, the research which you did with Z into the whole background, I don't even want to recount it with Bob Enyard. Of course, this opens up things which, how do you call that? Give you an uneasy feeling or whatever, right? You spoke about it
Mm,
for many hours. You presented all the evidence. And even if we just take, let's say, the official thing with this whole shadow golf thing, or even just in terms of ideology, that can be something simple
mhm,
to talk about, where it is quite strange that you have Bob Enyard, who, from what I understand, was a very strong anti-abortionist preacher, if
yep.
I understand that correctly.
Pro-life. He
And
was a pro-life. Yeah.
right. And I don't know because I haven't verified all the cases, but I only heard that there have been reports here and there about these very strong extremist anti-abortionists, let's say. And I'm wondering how often it was actually his group. I'm not sure if you had ever heard about these stories, right? About people,
Mhm,
being in front of the clinics, and maybe there were some reports. I'm not sure how I got wind of it, maybe through some mainstream
mhm.
reports many years ago, just that you have, oh, there are these crazies and these crazies. And I'm just wondering, maybe that was one of the groups which also to some extent maybe has been deliberately funded and propped up to fulfill a certain role. Because what is so strange to me, where in today's Western liberal world, one could say it is a strange position maybe to be strong anti-abortionist, because the general direction, I would say, progressive direction, would be to allow abortion in America. Or would you say I'm wrong about that? In terms of the
Yeah,
last
I mean,
decades, maybe now it's a
yeah,
bit
yeah, yeah.
changing again, but
Well, yeah, it's the whole idea of Roe versus Wade, and basically it's talking about like rape cases and incest cases, and they only it's like less than like 0.1% of all the cases are falling into those categories, maybe a little bit more, but it's like way under 1%. And because of that, it applies to everybody. And then now the gates are wide open for anybody to kind of murder people. And it's a very like delicate situation, but like basically, if you were a guy who murdered a pregnant woman, that was considered a double homicide. Okay, that's a double homicide. Okay, so you kill two people because you killed a woman and you killed the baby inside the woman. But then on another situation, it's not considered a homicide. So like, what are we talking about here? So there's legitimacy to pro life, but at the same time, it's like know it's like wide open for almost anything to happen though too. So
yes, no, I can very much understand actually the many differing pro-life positions. What I just wanted to point out here, it is strange that during a time when it at least appears to me, it was more moving into the direction of allowing abortion in whatever more and more extreme variants. Bob Enyard, which now is the church inherited more or less by Will Duffy, or
Mhm.
Bob Enyard himself as an individual, actually took a stance which would appear to me as a non-majority stance, let's say, or as a extremist stance, even as it was reported, I guess, but
Yep.
also a non-conformist stance, right? Or maybe
Yep.
even conspiratorial in a sense, because you could say, oh, why
Mhm.
not? That's just abort. If you go with the mainstream liberal ideology, why make a big fuss about this? Yeah. So
Right.
here he's taking a very, very strong position, But then at the same time, a little bit from what I heard, if anyone dared to question 9/11 or say anything about anything, then they are labeled as insane or something like this. So what I want to point out is, even though they themselves may take a position that the majority would consider to be very strange and unusual, they themselves then say, if you have any other view that is nonconformist, basically, you're crazy. Like, if you have any questions about 9/11, you're crazy. So I think that seems very selective to me, basically, not very logically consistent at all. Then you have this whole shadow golf thing, which he created, which I don't even remember all the things that he wrote there.
Yeah.
And yeah, and again, this would be the part where it's not about the message, but about the messenger, in a sense, and it's like circumstantial ideas. But certainly it is something that definitely should be looked at by anyone who really wants to understand what's going on. And unfortunately, I think it is not exactly completely irrelevant. And anything else further and beyond that, you did the expositions on that, which I think is great. There is the open question where certain allegations had been made against him, never addressed, I guess, by the church until today. And the evidence is still floating around on the internet. Usually what you would do is, if someone is accusing you of something, heavy, you would start a defamation case or something along those lines, if I'm correct, right? And you would not allow that to remain. So there are many, many, many big questions. Anyone who wants to know more about this, simply look for Bob Enyard on Nachiketa's channel. And on the video section in particular, you uploaded some things. Yeah, ideally there is nothing to it. It is completely unrelated. Unfortunately, I don't exactly believe that.
Yeah, well, it's the video is called "The Bizarre Case of Bob Enyart," but the basic, the premise of what you're talking about earlier is, I don't remember the exact terminology, but if I start saying things and I slander somebody, they have the right to sue me because I am slandering them. And to the point where the Kakoas, Danny Kakoa and Curtis Kakoa, are saying that Bob Enyart is a psychopath and he is a mass murderer and all this kind of stuff. And Bob Enyart killed John Benet Ramsey, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not claiming that. They're claiming that. But their position is, it's like, sue me. If you don't think that is true, then sue me. Then we go to court and we settle this. And that's what they were willing to do. That they were willing to be sued by Bob Enyart. But Bob Enyart never sued them. Now, the similar thing also occurred with it wasn't Bryce Taylor. What was that other girl? It was, Kathy O'Brien. Kathy O'Brien wrote the book, Transformation of America, and in the book, it's basically implicating, Hillary Clinton and other prominent politicians, and basically calling them out and saying that they are, the P word, and they are, people who done bad things, trafficking on all that kind of stuff, and the thing is, she's walking around. She's living a free life. And if somebody called somebody like that, they have to bring proof of that. And then, like, if, why aren't they being sued by these people? That's the thing. And so the ideal behind that is that these people don't want to take such individuals to court, because then it becomes like a next level. And forensics get involved, and all these eyewitnesses also get involved, and it becomes a big thing, and they just don't want to get there. Okay, so that's the situation with all that.
Yes. So for some reason, let's say just further scrutiny is not invited. That's, of course, interesting. I mean, there's many things coming to it. And now there's a few more like symbolic things, which you also brought. I'll just briefly mention it to recount it because I find it curious or interesting. Duffy has these 33 proofs for, what is it, open theology. We briefly looked at it at one point. Oh, I have a feedback.
Yeah, there's feedback.
Did I fix it?
Feedback.
Yep.
Feedback.
Yes.
Welcome, Andreas. Thank you very much for joining us.
Sorry. Can you hear me now? Is it feedback or is it me?
Yes, we can hear you, Andreas. Oh, we have a slight feedback, maybe. Very slight.
Yeah.
How about that? Is it better now? Let me know if I fixed it.
1, 2, 3, 4. We have no more feedback, I believe. Nachiketa, what do you say? I think we're good now.
Yeah, I think we're good to go.
Great. Sorry about that.
Awesome. So where we'd like to get back to now, we've just been talking about all the symbology, but actually now I just got to a point which I had mentioned to Andreas like months ago, because at least a few of the things that you presented, I was always like on Andreas' show with Europa was like, okay, guys, I know it's a particular topic, it's a long topic and it's deep and not Mike. And not everyone, wants to go that deep into these kind of things. But still, I always was pointing out the research that you did. And one of the things I brought up with Andreas was the strange idea that Will Duffy created these 33 rules for open theism or whatever. We looked at it briefly, I think, Nachiketa, maybe with Andreas, we open it up. I'm not even sure if it's worth to completely try to penetrate it philosophically, to use that term.
Right.
But it is curious. It is curious that he became a millionaire at 33 years old. It is curious if you look at his Agape Kingdom logo that you very easily can make out a Freemasonic square and compass. Although I will admit also that is a common shape and a nice, thing. So it does not always have to mean something, but
Right.
well, we have a few things coming together here. And what we could actually move on to now, if you like, also now that Andreas is here, because we haven't really spoken about this yet, is maybe briefly talk about the whole technical things, the question of the breath, the question of the shadows, the question of the drone. That may be something to talk about.
Yeah.
But maybe before we do that, let's just allow Andreas. So we talked about a few different things. We're filibustering a bit, but maybe Andreas, just first share your overall view of what you would say, what you've gleaned from this supposed experiment, what your ideas, what your thoughts are, what maybe your new inspirations are now that you're also in Europe and hearing
Well,
different
I didn't
opinions.
say anything too heartwarming about it to you already. I felt bad because I wanted to be more critical, but my initial response was just so much distrust in the video itself that was strange, because normally I'm not super, I mean, I'm a biased person, everyone's biased, but I don't consider myself super invested in one model or one way of looking at the world or anything like that. Like, no piece of propaganda usually makes me emote so strongly. But there's just something about the way this is supposed to be the final experiment, and I'm like, who are these people? Why are they important? And what makes them think that they're the ones who can do the final experiment? Before even then, what is the final experiment? And Nachiketa, we talked about Eric Dubé's video, and I think it wasn't amazing, but he said some pretty important things, which are, did they do any of the tests that we've been asking for 20 years? 10 or 15 years at least. I feel like 2010, 2012, people were already starting to say, hey, if we had just this laser test, or we could see this particular example of a heliocentric, debunking, this would call into question a lot of things that flat earthers believe, and it would re-solidify faith in the establishment, because it's a big thing. It's not just about flat earth. It's about whether, you could be not a flat earther and still just know that NASA's lying to you about everything, and that not just NASA, but that's the sort of venue for military intelligence around the world that are interacting with other states, trying to hide particular regions for whatever reason. I mean, whether it be, the Carmen, what's it called? This Carmen San Diego. What's the name of that island? I'm sorry, I forget now. But I'm talking about the island off the coast of Australia and Malaysia, where there was the Flight 370. Diego Garcia. Sorry. That's how I had to remember it was Carmen San Diego. That's horrible. But, there's all these places where there's reasons why satellites or whatever sort of aerial photography is done to mask and camouflage and hide certain land masses. And it has nothing to do necessarily with what shape the world is. But it is, it can, but it's just, in general, it makes complete sense that if there's a military base in a certain place, you might not release that information. Not just a military base, but information about Antarctica, for sure. Because you have to imagine, before the Suez Canal and
cloaking
Panama
device,
Canal,
something that's on no map at all, right? That's the best
yeah,
cloaking.
exactly. Or, and then like something else that's on that map that isn't the thing. So you can say, this is a really simple, don't worry about it, this is what it is. So I don't know, that's just going into it. I felt more distrust than normal, more skepticism than normal. I'm already a pretty skeptical person, but it just felt like there's something weird about this. And I think, Raph, we talked about the background of some of the people involved, and it made me call into question just what else are they. It's not just whether or not they're trustworthy to talk about science. It's like, how deep are they in the controlled opposition camp? Because it could be to the point that it's, their families are endangered, and so they have to say what they want to say. It could be that they make sacrifices of loved ones so that they can be famous. But when you're asking questions like that, I feel like it pulls you out of this, it's the final objective. Nothing objective felt like, this is just me going into it. Then watching the thing, how many mistakes were made, whether or not you mean it was faked. That's not what I'm saying necessarily, but just how many mistakes were made, even leaving the green screen chroma key feature on, and the way that they went about everything it made it so much worse for them to pretend that this is this final experiment. I felt like emotionally exhausted from them pretending that this is some definitive proof. And then also, we've talked about this already, but the lighting from noontime, where every shadow is casting in every direction and changing.
Actually, just before you go on, Andreas, let's go through this one by one. Yeah, because I made a bit
Fair
of a
enough.
list.
Yeah,
and we can talk about each of those, and we can see how much information or idea we can glean. So what I already said before, I'll just reiterate briefly, is the question which hasn't been asked. It seemed like a half-baked operation. That's what we talked about with Nachiketa. And it seemed like they deliberately, 3 months before the thing, thought about getting new GoPros or something like that, or started thinking about the batteries they need, which is, if I hear anything about maybe going to Antarctica, the first thing as a YouTuber or streamer or whatever is, I'm like, okay, how many cameras, how many battery packs and all of that.
No, it's like, which loved one do you have to sacrifice so that you have the right? Sorry, go ahead.
That's what you said. So so number one is, like you said,
you got to pick your priorities. You can always get GoPro and Red Bull to sponsor you once you decide to tell the world what they want to hear.
So number one, as you also mentioned, what would have been the test that would have been realistic, satisfactory for the requirements that people that are investigating this would say, okay, if I see this, I really call into question, let's say, the curvature of the Earth, for example. Yeah, but none of that was checked for. Then what I want to say, even just generically, even just from a perceptual point of view, and I understand maybe this is not very in anymore, but when I was looking at the first 24-hour time-lapse footage, that's the first thing they released, right? The 50 seconds by Dave McKeegan, I believe. Okay, aside from maybe the sun morphing, this and that, we can discuss about that, or even I said it now, the sun.
For sure.
What am I really seeing on that video? I see a video with some guys with something that looks like a snow ice sheet or something. And if I'm really honest, even when I'm looking out at the sky, when it's daytime, I see a light in the sky. That's what I really see. And how am I supposed to 100% perfectly know that this is the one sun? Here already we have like this basic assumption where I'm like, where'd you get that from? How can you be 100% certain of that? Maybe there's things like, I think they talked about sunspot analysis and stuff like that. Okay, maybe here we can get somewhere. But before that, it's just a light in the sky. Yeah. I think that's just important to remember.
Yeah.
Right. And yes.
Which also, just really quickly, because that's another thing, people are using this to prove whether this is one model or another model, rather than looking at what else could be in the middle. I'm not just talking about the electric universe or quantum holographic, etc. There's even just the difference of how you look at a heliocentric model. And do you believe in this sort of biblical version with this firmament where light can refract from different angles? There's a lot of different things. I just wanted to say that, like, because that particular test, it doesn't necessarily prove what we want it to prove. It definitely doesn't debunk flat Earth. And it certainly seems to be leading towards the idea that whatever you're experiencing, all you ever hear about Antarctica is that it's anomalous. Everything about it's this is not like anywhere else. It has a different atmosphere. It has different ionosphere. It has any meteor that falls won't be shattered. It won't be torn apart when it lands. So the entire place should be covered in meteors. There's just more and more anomalous, whatever they say about Antarctica. It's not the way it is in any other place, right?
Allegedly.
Yes.
Allegedly, yeah. Although,
Yes. Well,
I
you
do know
can.
some. I do know some. Like, I had a friend who was he ran telescopes in Atacama in Chile, and he was a Frenchman, and he'd left France because he'd gotten in trouble because he'd been part of some weird hacking crew that were recording with telescopes, and they were getting in between photos, so they could see like hidden satellites. His big hobby was photographing stealth satellites. And they were like, stop, So then he went to Chile, and he just has a business there where he helps people see, because there's no there's no ozone, there's less ozone. It's easier to see without any refraction of light. Basically, you can see the planets as close to the way you could ever see them in real life from the Earth, right? It's pretty cool. But asking him, like, where would you ever want to go to collect meteors or to, take photos and everything? Instantly, guttural response is Antarctica, because he'd been able to be there since Argentina and Chile, they have, expeditions for certain scientists. And it's just everywhere he went, he said he was able to pick up meteors off the ground. So whatever that means, just from his own experience, I think that's interesting, right?
Sky's falling.
Yeah, well, the
Okay.
sky's falling everywhere, but they're saying in Antarctica that they're not being torn apart as they land for whatever reason. I find that very interesting.
Maybe that's the firmament. Who knows? And then he's picking
No,
up
it's
little
just
pieces of
pieces.
the firmament. All right, let's continue. Raphael, what do you got for us?
All right. So we're just going through all the strange things that happened. So the one thing, maybe Nudge, you probably have the best overview about this. What is your current perspective on the Vape-gate? I'll just very briefly say, if there turns out to be anything to it, of course, unfortunately, also all kinds of strange possibilities open up, including the idea that some others have mentioned already, whether this could even be deliberate to be like, oh, like, guys, something is up. So it's even the question whether, again, what was presented on stream as is in terms of, oh, I want to prove you this, whether there could also be another hidden message within this. I'm not claiming this. I have no idea. All why I'm saying this is only because if already from what I could glean, it was kind of shown that there was no breath or something at all. And then to make this very deliberate, like black out the screen, walk away, apparently completely unaware there are other cameras, that is very strange.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, look, like if you look at the distance between Whitsid and that camera that was actually filming Whitsid, from his position, you can clearly see that somebody could be filming him, and like I mean, so like either he is so high that he is like just completely unaware of what's happening, but like my position about Vape-gate is that it's actual, there's substance to it. I think he is actually faking the breath and saying that it is cold. That is my position. And, that doesn't mean I'm in the position that, Antarctica is fake or whatever. I am questioning Witsit and his attempt to show
Exactly.
his his audience that there is, like, I don't know, condensation going on. And, condensation happens with cold weather. And people are like, hey, show us how cold it is. And then so he went in there and got a vape and he tested it out. It works. And he goes in front of his screen and does a half of, exhale and then no more, So it's very strange to me. Like, why behave in that way? So go ahead.
Yeah,
And
that's
just,
a good way to
just
put
very
it, though, is
briefly,
it's
this
not,
is important
that
data
guy's
point, very
crazy.
briefly, Andres. Now, just important because yesterday someone posted the video about this Antarctic marathon. And I looked at it a bit, but was it like clear that there is no breath during the marathon as well? What would you say about that, Nudge?
Well, I mean, I only saw a bit of it. I didn't watch the whole 1 hour and 15 minutes of that video. But from what I understand, what THC Mike was trying to present is that, look, see, these people are running in Antarctica, but there's no breath. And then they're actually running on the hard packed snow. So maybe there weren't going to be footprints either. So that should discount, our, like, debunking of these like Snowgate
Yes.
slash Vape-gate. Yeah.
And all I want to say here, because I looked it up briefly, the video, and it's on First Post. And again, this is only purely circumstantial evidence, which has no, how should I say, scientific forensic bearing. but it's more like this association game and trying to glean information. First post, I know about it because I like to watch the strangest TV channels I can find, and it's one of the famous channels from India, because you have Palki Sharma, and she switched from Vantage to this, and she's talking so nice, and the whole Asian region or whatever, Africa, they all believe she's giving neutral news only because she's not as Western biased. But if you listen closely, of course, they have their own bias, right? But anyways, why I'm saying this, first post is known, even when I was looking it up while your show was going on yesterday, they were just live streaming the most recent SpaceX launch. And they are always the ones that are the first ones and best ones to stream you any SpaceX footage. They, of course, went big on the Chandrayaan Indian space thing. So I just want to point out that they are definitely an outlet to promote this type of information. Doesn't mean now that they, Photoshop the breath away or anything, but just want to say that, yeah, just so people know.
Yep.
So
I was
Andreas,
thinking about the Titanic. That in that movie Titanic, they shot it in Mexico or Hawaii, I forget. But the whole thing with the breaths was a big deal because it was all CGI to make them look like they were breathing cold breath. It was all fake, and I feel like it's kind of reminds me of that in a lot of ways. This idea of how hard is it to really make it look like it's cold? It's not that hard to make it look like it's cold. But one thing I've noticed is, like, I was in Ushuaia, which is as south as you can get in Argentina, as close to Antarctica as you can get. And, it was in the wintertime, and it was pretty much only in the coldest of night, super cold. I feel like that's a big part of what they suggest about Antarctica is that it's not just cold, it's a desert. And so that dryness in any desert means that when there's no sun, then it should be pretty cold. But during times where there's enough sunlight, it's pretty obviously not unbearable. It's far colder in the northern Arctic circle, like Yakutsk or something. It's like 70 degrees below zero in Yakutsk in the wintertime. And you cannot go outside or your face will freeze off. So it's just crazy to me that there are people that live in cities that are maybe 3 or 4 or 5 times colder, literally, than Antarctica. I don't know. The whole thing seems ridiculous.
I mean, we saw the auspicious picture of them posing shirtless, right? And overall, because this would be the real point, then I mean, I don't have a problem. Why not? Maybe it's nice weather there and so on.
Good for you.
I think that's cool. Then my only question is, why are we not then properly exploring this and so on? Because that would be the reason, right? Or they still claim it's the ice bear or whatever. But technically, it should be because it's so inhospitable, right? But apparently, it didn't seem that inhospitable, So
yeah, no. As far as I can tell, it's never been that. It's really weird. It just seems like the earliest environmentalism. You have at the same time that the Antarctica treaties and even the North Pole Explorers Club is happening. You have similar group. I think the same people. One of the members of the Explorer Club is Theodore Roosevelt, and so people creating the nature preserves, state parks, Yellowstone and things like that. It's really weird. You got these oil tycoons who don't care about genocide, and they like it, in fact. And then they're saying, "Oh, but we need to be environmentalists." It's not. I mean, you can kind of excuse it in the 1960s or the 1990s. You're like, yeah, sure. People were watching Friends. There's a lot of propaganda. People just love nature. There's greenwashing. But 1890s, why? Why is there such a push for this, fairy treaty where you say no human can go here or build anything here? This is all natural land. And not just that, because you can say whatever you want to say. It's that we're willing to, at gunpoint, protect state forests. We're gonna build tankers and boats, and we're gonna shoot out of the sky with missiles any plane or any group that gets too close to this state park, this nature preserve. That's the weirdest thing about not just all other state parks, but Antarctica, that it's essentially a nature preserve. For whatever reason, we've decided collectively we can't agree on anything. These are people that this is also World War II. People are killing each other, completely racist. It's nearly the end of the world. Again, genocide. And these people, Russia and Argentina and the Nazis and America, and everybody, they can all agree on Antarctica, that this is a place that we all have to protect together. Why? What's the deal? You know, it's like fluoride in your water level humanitarianism.
Yeah.
Well put. So just because also in the first hour we talked about wanting to cover or at least mention all angles. So Levelhead and Natalie here wrote, they want people to focus on breath, footprints, shadows, if it was fake, etc. Anything but the lack of physics in this so-called experiment. Maybe Natalie or maybe Natch, you can interpret what she means by that exactly.
That
Or
was what
Andreas, maybe
pissed
you
me
have an
off
idea.
the most, right? No, I just wanted to just harp on it for a second. That's what pissed me off the most. I was like, did they do any of the tests that we've been asking for over a decade? That all the flat Earth question people have said, hey, you know what? If you did this, did they do any of those tests? Not one of them, right? And then they call it the final experiment, just pissed me off.
Well, I mean, look, but they made it very clear what the test was about and why. So I don't know how much you've been following about that, Andreas, but basically, Will Duffy says that seeing the 24-hour sun in Antarctica was one exclusive thing that Earthers and globe Earthers they are mutually exclusive on. You know, a lot of other things is speculative about seeing too far or whatever, 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 and then it's like hearsay. But that's one thing that everybody can agree that either it exists or don't exist based on the model, right? So that's all they
I
wanted to
don't think
do
so though.
anyway.
That's what Eric Dubé, when I meant earlier when I talked about the idea of under the firmament refraction of light, the idea that you could be seeing light from the sun at different angles depending on what sort of dense firmament that we're experiencing. So there's definitely, regardless, there are flat earthers that believe that could happen, that the light could be refracting through a firmament, and you're not actually seeing the sun, you're seeing the refraction of the sun. So if you're like looking at this dome and the light's above it moving around, and then it's going through the firmament. So from any angle, the light is shining and you're seeing it over here and they're seeing it over here. It's refraction. So you could see the sun in multiple places at the same time, right? That's essentially an optical illusion that would happen if you were inside of a fishbowl. So that is something that some flat earthers out there have already made
I
up a
believe
reason
that's the
why that
model
makes sense.
by Joseph Hanby, Nachiketa, if you know the
Can you,
reference.
what's that? What was the question?
I believe that is the model by Joseph Hanby, if I have the name correct, where you see, the lights and the dome,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
you see the
Mhm.
apparent one. Yeah. What do you think about that idea or concept? Because I think it's intriguing. Whether it's correct or not, of course, is open, but it's interesting. And I always honestly wondered about this refraction idea in general. And if there is anything to the dome, of course, always wondered naturally if it is like a glass or something. And if assuming the light that we call the sun is beyond that, I was always wondering if that could in some way, shape, or form change how we see it, right? And then it could lead up eventually to effects like this Joseph Hanby model is describing. I can imagine it. I don't know. What do you think about it?
Yeah, well, okay. I wanted to talk about that, and maybe I did briefly yesterday. I don't remember, but basically, regarding any man-made models, it's only going to there's going to be a lot of issues in my mind, regarding any kind of models, right? And the other thing of it is that if you look at this is something that Q and Fee presented, but if we go with the AE map, right, the Gleason map, right? And then during the equinox, we're going to experience 90-degree sunrises and 270-degree sunsets. That's what the equinox is that the sun is, rising from one end and completely setting on the other end. But that's happening in multiple locations on a longitudinal line, which means that from each observer from North Canada to America to South America, they're seeing the sun rising at 90 degrees and setting at 270, which cannot possibly is it's almost like you can't have one singular sun to be able to do that, one singular light source to be able to do that. It's just impossible. And then on the other side, the sun is setting. It's like there's no possible way that any human being, I don't think, who can make that model where each observer on the ground is able to they have one light up in the sky that is like doing some interesting stuff, but that's all they got. That is something very, I don't know, beyond our technical ability to be able to present that in the right way. Do you want to share something, Andreas? Do you want me to put that up there?
Just for well, just for a second, just because we were talking about that model, and this is like you just said, Raphael, Joseph Hanvi's firmament
And
model.
just very
And
briefly, Carrie wrote in chat, which is maybe relevant, says Joseph Hanby was originally asked to go to Antarctica first by Duffy.
yeah,
He passed
right.
and put him in contact with the others. That's also interesting.
Yeah, I feel like it's rather suspect. Anyway, you look at the model and you can see the idea that light from above, smaller spheroids, and this is the other thing. According to the Tamil and the Vedic solar astronomy, the heliocentric model of the Tamil show multiple disks, just like Nachiketa said, but there's multiple suns and moons, which are essentially similar. They're similar disks that have heating and cooling properties, right, in the Vedic tradition. But this idea that light will shine from different angles, you get this, if you get a camera, 4 or 5 or 6 cameras from every angle, you'll get light shining in the direction of that camera, even though it's all from one source. And so refraction can happen in such a way that they're producing the exact same experience in different places. Now, if that's not, I don't know exactly, about 270 degrees, I'm not sure exactly what it would take for the light to shine the way that we're experiencing it, but it's not impossible. And, and this is a big part of the two sun thing, the idea that you see two suns multiple times, right? Is this because it's two solar disks, or is it because of refraction? I tend to be a refraction person. I'm totally open to the Vedic sun model. It makes enough sense to me as well. It's just that neither one of them proves that it's a globe model. That's all I'm saying. That's all most of these people were saying. And it's only important because they called it the final experiment. That's what is aggravating about it, because it doesn't disprove these other models that people have had. And maybe there's some truth to this. We have to look at the 270-degree arch. I think there's something to that. Like, why is it that it's always consistent every single time? That I can agree with you, Nachiketa. That's pretty crazy. But I mean, again, consistency is an indication of there being a system. So, I mean, it doesn't disprove it either, just because of that either.
What would you accept as proof, Andreas? What would be
That's a good
good proof
question.
for you?
Okay, so I think, again, I'd go back to Dubé's video that he talked about, like about 12 different experiments. I would say there's about 12 experiments that would be pretty useful that we could do. That if we could actually use Google's laser unidirectional Wi-Fi signals and able to actually measure like this distortion of curve, that would be pretty useful. The same way that they originally did a test where they, across Denmark, they were trying to show how much of a curve or loss there is just on a straight sea a mile across. Do that test, but do it so high in the sky that you don't have to worry about water refraction. And then using equipment that can actually infer if there's been any sort of arc or refraction of the laser, because it should be a completely pure unidirectional signal. I think that would be like probably the most convenient way to tell. That would be my favorite test to do. I think is the laser test. But there's definitely,
okay, but as far as the laser test is concerned, like, is there like, would you accept 1 mile, 10 miles, 100 miles of laser tests?
I mean, you could do. That's the cool thing about Google having laser satellites. There are even Luma balloons that you could do this literally for thousands of miles, because Google has balloons that are all across the Western Hemisphere and Europe. So you should be able to do something that shows you as far from the North Pole to the South as you want, or whatever you across, like you're saying. You should be able to see it directly just with that. And then also convex concave tests that were mentioned in the earlier, by Dubé. There's just tons of tests that could be done that would tell us if something's actually convex or if we're experiencing light refraction. I think radio tests are pretty practical as well, because you can actually tell how much something is bouncing. If something is hitting, how long it takes, the distance it takes for something to bounce a wave. Is it the same? Is there a difference quotient that shows in California versus in Ibiza, the same radio wave, shortwave radio, I think already kind of disproves that the Earth has the same curvature that we're told. So it's just, if they could do more tests that show that, that would be really beneficial. And I don't think it's a bad idea to try to show the sun from multiple angles, at the same time to catch it in Antarctica. I think that's a cool project to do, but I don't feel like it was.
What do you think the sun is, Andreas? Have you ever thought about it?
Yeah, I think the sun. Well, okay. So I'm open to both models. I'm not an anti-globe model. I'm okay.
Yeah. That's fine. You can be whatever you want. That's fine.
I'm okay with the incandescent gas model, but I'm not against the idea, and I'm not been proven that it's. I mean, the idea of the sun and the moon are both. They look the same size. They look the same distance. They're right next to each other. But that God's just messing with you, and that one's really big and one's really small, and one's really far and one's really close. That seems really weird to me. That seems really interesting kind of ideology that we've created, that you can't trust your own perspective. You can't trust your own perception. You have to believe that whatever you're seeing is a lie. If that's the truth, then that's really interesting, because there's no reason for them to be the same size. And yet that is exactly, we live in this anomalous reality where even every NASA person will tell you how crazy of a miracle it is that we have this moon, that's this giant moon that's so close to us that no other planet has a moon like this. Even the biggest gas giants, which have moons, they're not like our moon, right? So there's something very strange about our circumstances either way. But the idea that these are really just solar disks, Vedic solar disks, I think there's a reason to consider that.
And is there a way to come to conclude one way or another, do you think?
Well, that's the other funny thing. Wasn't there that test a few years ago where somebody blew themselves up in a rocket? I think we were all laughing. Most people were laughing at the flat earther on CNN. They were talking about the flat earther grandpa or something.
Are you talking about Mad Mike? Are you talking about Mad Mike?
I think Mad Mike sounds right. Is that the guy who built the rocket and blew himself up in the rocket? Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, Mad Mike Hughes. So the CNN, there's all these channels that were saying, look at this ridiculous person that's trying to use rockets to do this test. Granted, you could probably do that with cameras. You probably didn't need a person to do his tests. But at the same time, I think those tests are pretty reasonable. They're at least as reasonable as the Antarctica expedition.
Well, do you think there's a possibility that Mad Mike was not really a flat earther who was trying to prove to himself and others that the earth is flat, that there could be a possibility that he was a kind of a different disinformation individual, and he was placed in a position to make flat earth look ridiculous? Do you think that's a possibility?
I think that's also, I think anybody who's given any opportunity to talk about a thing is usually done to make it look ridiculous. A lot of the time, if it's something that's important, both they want people to have access to the data, and they want to make it sound not very dangerous. Rather, his looking into it's dangerous, but the information itself is silly, right? Flat Earth is a joke, so you shouldn't look into it. Look at this crazy guy who did. So yeah, I 100% agree. That's the way. Especially because I didn't hear about him until after it happened, and CNN and CBC were saying, look at this idiot, right? Like, look how crazy he is. This is how bad it's gotten. Flat earthers are asking too many questions and they're dying because of it, right? That was the way it was presented. Whereas I feel like this final experiment thing is far more legacy media approved. It's just easier for them to say, yeah, look, see, it's totally cool that we wanted them to go down and do this. And they proved, like we already knew, that you have to trust the establishment.
Right, which begs the question, which is that if that's what if we know that's what they want people to do, and that's what people saw who went down there, then and everybody agrees that there is a 24-hour sun in Antarctica, and then the whole experiment was basically saying that if you see the 24-hour sun, the Earth must be a globe, and so the logical conclusion would be that they want everybody to know that the Earth is a globe, right? So if they already want everybody to know the Earth is a globe, it might not be a globe, if you're
Yeah.
conspiratorial minded, right?
That's, I think, the thing. It forces. It's weird, but it's true. It forces a reverse psychology on you, where if you're hearing it from a source you know has lied to you, then you feel like you shouldn't trust them in principle. It's like, wow, I didn't know that I didn't believe this because I thought I believed this. But if they're telling me to believe this, then I can't believe this. I think that's another dangerous thing that we have to consider. There's definitely a psychological reactionary distrust that happens. But I don't think that that's what everyone's going through either. I think it's important. I think it really is important. I think most people should just reject the globe, whether it's true or not. It doesn't matter. You should reject it just because you're rejecting authority. I think rejecting authority is worth living a lie. If that's the way it comes down to, honestly, start there. But I'm not saying that everyone's into that. I'm saying that a lot of people just want to know what experiments can be done and why are certain things being stopped from, why are certain tests forbidden? Why are you not allowed to travel there? I mean, it's not just a question of money. It's not that you can just pay a bunch of money and you can walk across Antarctica. They have all sorts of crazy rules there. And there's all sorts of, what's the name of the New Zealand plane that they blew up when it was flying too close to Antarctica? There's a lot of these situations where it's too suspicious and it doesn't really equate either way with the globe or the flat earth model. It equates with the idea that there's something in Antarctica they don't want you to see. And so they're making it seem like an absurdity to even look into it because it calls into question the entire epistemology of your entire reality, of your entire world. Right. And it might be that there's just a military base there. I mean, the Fitbit recordings already is interesting. Why aren't we talking more? I mean, why is that something that's not posted about all the time? That there's a military base underground. That seems already more interesting than these guys taking off their shirts and walking around, right?
Okay, yeah, I don't disagree that there could be a multitude of things that they don't want us to know in Antarctica, wherever that Antarctica is, if even if it actually exists. And so obviously, flat earthers look at Antarctica as the circumference of the Earth. So it's a big region that surrounds the known lands, right? And then, of course, the globe earther believe it to be like an island down there somewhere, right? So that makes quite a bit of a difference of the military installation and where it's actually
True.
located and what it actually does, right? Raphael, did you want to chime in?
Yes, basically just exactly what we're talking about now. Just as there is a particular definition of what space is, which is, I understand, simply is a certain anything from a certain altitude above, then you can claim I have something in space, right? And the same thing is the question, how is Antarctica defined? And again, here we have I don't know, deliberately being led down the wrong path when everyone says, oh, I'm in Antarctica. I'm in Antarctica. What does that mean exactly? I'm sorry, again, I'll say it, you're on some kind of ice sheet. The names don't make me trust it more. I'm not sure if that's the right direction now, but Rothschild Island, Deception Island. If it's true, there's a Delta Island, an Omicron Island. I'm just looking for Corona Island. I don't know what else. So that's not increasing my trust either. So they're either then on, let's say, some outer rim of that big island on the globe model, which is only one particular probably outer rim part of that anyway. So how does it look at the exact center and so on? That's never being questioned. Doesn't have to be, because everyone just repeats the idea, oh, we're in Antarctica, as if Antarctica is like the 50 square meters where they set up all the cameras. That's Antarctica now. But even that in itself is a complete joke. Yeah. So yeah, the definition of what it is, then, Deception Island, all of that, right? So yeah, that's the thing that I wanted to add on to that. And where'd they go?
Yeah, I think they're going to need to have everyone go to Antarctica. You're going to have a 50,000 person Burning Man festival. That's what it's going to take. Just get everyone there, because the idea that they're all in Antarctica and it's just a beach, they're not allowed to go very far, right? I think it was Mr. Beast who named one of the mountains of Antarctica Mount Shopify. The entire thing just seems too ridiculous that they're not allowed to see anything inland at all. And like Nachiketa just said, this epistemological view is very different. It's a little tiny island to most people. It's not, to other people, it's the entire rim around the world. So it's a
It's not
much
so
bigger
little.
space.
It's not
Yeah,
so
but they
little. I
like
mean,
to tell you
even
it is.
well, I mean, according to their model, it's bigger than America. It's like one
True.
and a half times of America,
But
even
you're still not
according
allowed to
to the
go
globe
there,
model.
even if you're like so burnt like Jimmy Donaldson, like the Mr. Beast. He's allowed to go what, like a half a quarter mile onto the. This is the thing that's crazy. Like, oh, you came to Antarctica and you stayed on the beach. It's not like they're walking across. Even there was the hike or a couple years ago. It was like the Royal hike across Antarctica. Right, and I think they did this thing where they're supposed to walk across Antarctica, but they didn't walk across Antarctica. They walk around it. So the idea that they're just going this very small part of it, regardless of what model it is, that's all we're even seeing. We're not seeing the entirety of the island. And I think that's important, right? And again, island, because that's what we're told it's supposed to be. Prove it then. Show us the middle part of the island. Make it more clear that it's actually this it's just a landmass instead of this South Bowl, right?
All right, let's continue on with the presentation. If you got anything more, Raphael, that you want to put on the table.
Yes. So I'll go through a few more things I jotted down. So what we do have is the strange shadows. What is your guys' perspectives on the strange shadows?
You go ahead, Andreas. You go ahead first.
I mean, the same thing that you might say. It's just I don't have a good explanation for it. I'm sure someone will come up with an explanation for why the light angle is shifting so much. It
The
just
one
seems
argument
ridiculous.
made was that the cameraman is moving. And I
That's
looked at
not a
it
good
again.
enough
I had to
angle.
look at it more. Yeah, I'm not sure if that angle is enough. And even here, I think someone should be able to model that and then at least see on a CGI on a computer or something.
That's the craziest
checks out.
part of also. I think anytime you do a model and you ask anybody like why when they're making a video game that all video games are flat Earth model. There's no globe based video game engine. It just doesn't. It's not very convenient to do.
Well, yeah, you know what they do is that it's like flat when you're on the planet, but once you start leaving, it turns into a ball, right? So like there's like a point
Sure.
where you start to if they have these like big RPG games, like role playing games, and you can fly jets and spaceships and all this kind of stuff. But once they get onto the land, they start to it's like flattened out. But like once they start to leave, it becomes smaller, and so there's like a point where it turns into
It
like a
flips.
globular type of thing. But as far as the shadows is concerned, my initial position was that I could not explain the shadows. I was like, wow, this is really fucked up. Why are they coming in at different angles? Why are they shortening and lengthening? And then somebody was telling me, well, the camera man is moving from one position to another. But at the same time, like, why would the shadow length would change? That's like what's going through. Is that like a perspective thing? It's not changing because just because McToons is walking 20 feet or 30 feet, you shouldn't have that shadow length change. It should maintain the same shadow length duration of the whole time. So if the shadow length is indeed changing, that is a red flag of some sort. Something is going on there, right? And that has to be accounted for.
Right. I agree with that.
Yes. Then, so adding to this, of course, I want to do forensic film analysis or talk to people that work with these like studio equipment things and LED and volume, Amazon Studio, whatever people say that exists, and some claim that's what it is. I wouldn't claim that, but I would want to talk to people who are well versed in that technology, because ideally, if you have them looking at it and doing some analysis, they should simply be able to tell whether there is a strong likelihood that some type of this technology is being used. So I don't think anyone actually would have to make any claims about that, like, oh, it's certainly this or that, but just in a very calm way. There are certain tools, not saying that those would be perfect, but it should at least give a certain credibility or likelihood to whether or not, whatever, you can detect that LEDs have been used or whatever else. And which again doesn't mean that the whole thing is fake or whatever, but just as with any movie, you check for, is there any CGI or anything else that you can possibly see? And I think in a calm analysis, that should be possible and should yield some results. The other very strange thing we have is the drone footage. So we see, I believe it is, I guess, several of the guys playing with the drone, one of them Mctoon, and apparently, of course, it's a kind of fun video to watch where you see the drone with the close detection signal, and it's very also very strange because you can very clearly hear it on the stream, like very loudly, almost as if it's a signal from the laptop, or I'm not sure how this works, but it seems very close. And then he's moving back. First, it seems it's detecting the individual Mctoon, and then it may or may not be, I'd have to look at it again, that the drone is moving far enough away from him that it wouldn't detect him, but then it appears to detect something else. So the alarm is going off. And that, of course, is super strange. And at least for me, I could very well imagine there just being whatever, a painted wall, LED thing, whatever else. Again, not claiming that's what it is, but it's also something to look at with the drone. But aside from any detection thing, I would say if I have a drone there, I would try to take it a little bit farther. And if I'm not allowed to take it a bit farther, at least I would put on record and be like, yeah, these guys, they don't allow us to go farther. It's really sad, but look, I'm going as far as I can, or something. But they seem perfectly content to stay within that 20-meter radius or whatever they had, like overall. And I understand in a certain sense that that's where you want to set up your thing and it's maybe a restricted area and so on. But then at least, yeah, I would mention that I'm bothered about it, that I'm not allowed to at least walk 200 meters in that direction. Or, they did something with the bikes, but I didn't check like the trajectory. So that would be interesting, basically saying how wide of an area do you actually see, even officially, that individuals actually are walking within. That would be interesting to know. Or if there's actually like a sequence where they go a long way, one direction, this or that. We have the marathon footage, which may be also interesting. But anyways, and the real issue is because we don't exactly know the existing technology and what was used, if any, and also don't know all the possible combinations. It may be something a bit more tricky than we first expect. And I would hopefully expect them, if it is some sort of deception, to go to that level, just as in the 60s when they knew you're just going to have a grainy something, we have much stronger propaganda, people will buy that. Of course, now they would have to up their game, use red herrings, use the psychological tactics, and maybe also deliberately use different kinds of technical ideas in various ways, again, just to have people go confused and go crazy. So yeah, what do you guys think about the whole drone footage and volume idea?
I would push the limits too. And I'm American. I can only imagine, like, you're European. You know what I mean? Like, if you would push the limits, can you only imagine what an American would do? It's just a bunch of nonsense. Nobody's flying a drone and just stopping where they're told. Once they get to Antarctica, what are they going to do to you? Throw you in penguin jail? It's just a bunch of nonsense. Come on. Push the limits.
I'm not sure if we're talking about the same thing or not, but from my at least my understanding about the drone from what Will Duffy was flying, there was a specific drone that he flew, and then it has like a proximity sensor. So if it's near an object, it's going to beep, right? So at least in my mind, that it seemed to be operating. I mean, McToon's was like back there. Will Duffy's right there. He just flew it like near around McToon's, and it flew to like Will Duffy. It's not a big deal to me. Like I'm only really questioning the Vape-gate at this moment, right? Now, if you really want to go to the very nth of the whole fake stuff, there's a possibility that everything could have been faked. We have the technology with deep fake and CGI, Amazon 15 Studio, whatever. Have a bigger version of the Amazon 15 Studio, military grade, higher technology, et cetera, et cetera. And, they're not really, maybe they're not even there. Maybe the technology is so high that they're just all CGI themselves, like it's like kind of like a Final Fantasy actors, and then none of it has to be real. We cannot confirm. But if they are so sloppy to the point where they're leaving a chromochrome key, right, on, and then they're like, people are, with a regular Joe using their computer can dissect and dismantle all the crap that is going on with it. I have to kind of think that that is done deliberately. They want to be caught, and they want people to question it. And so what does it do? It puts people in a kind of this polarizing position again. whether that it's all fake and it's all fucking, shills and all this kind of stuff, and they are going to like look crazy to this group of people who have to believe that it's also real though too. So maybe that's like optically speaking, they wanted both things to happen. They're leaving enough clues for these people to latch onto to like see, hey, 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 look, 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 look. That shit is fake. Why did they have the chroma key on? Why did they have the green screen on? What's up with all the shadows and stuff like that? And so they go in that direction, while the other people is like, we went to Antarctica. What are you talking about? We saw the 24-hour sun. So everybody gets a piece of it, you know?
Yeah, I mean that makes sense too. Like they're just forcing you to be psychologically prepared for your entire reality breaking. I mean, a lot of the kids I know, like younger kids, seem to already accept that the world's flat, that space is a lie. They never went to the moon landing. It's usually people over 30 that can't handle it. You know what I mean? Maybe even over 25. But like, because like you lived your whole life. At that point, you went to school, you got a degree. They either beat you into believing it or you've been keeping your head to the ground anyway. There's not much you can do. It's the 10-year-olds that they're like, you know what? 2 + 2 isn't 5. 2 + 2 = 4 sometimes. They're just starting to let younger people aware, just in case they need them to know what's really going on pretty soon. That's what it feels like.
So yeah, I just want to underline again, we have to be aware, what are we supposed to see? Always be aware, even in these things, we have to think whether Trump is playing 5D chess or not, it doesn't matter. Every one of us should learn to play 5D chess and think in these ways again, because unfortunately there are people that want to lead you down a certain path and deceive you. So I think what you're saying is very important. Even just maybe the whole goal is just to make people go at each other's throats, and it doesn't even matter what then is. It's just important that people fight, whatever, discord, order out of chaos, 33,
yeah, that's true.
So it's all something to consider. And maybe if anyone listening, also only if you want to be, of course, yeah, I would always advocate to try to be amenable and friendly. Nachiketa, the job you're doing with this always is amazing, even when people, maybe some would say, go kind of unhinged on you, how you are so welcoming. I'm always amazed, and I think it is really objectively the right approach, and I can only encourage everyone, maybe take a slice of that, especially if you're just an honest researcher, because I'm always saying to friends, always like, who else is there? If you find someone who's not paid off, bought off, whatever, at least don't fight unnecessarily, because for what? If we all want to find the truth, it makes more sense, at least not to get into each other's way unnecessarily, just to make drama. But anyways, next thing, Chad is reading my thoughts. Someone wrote, did we hear about Mountain Gate? So I'm just going through these things, whether we believe them or not doesn't matter, but I want to point it out because it is curious. So apparently from a chat comment I picked up, it says, the picture's perfect identical match up of the TFE background and the 2016 photo, which was dated in November 27 at 3:33 Ellis Mountain. 2017, and apparently this was posted on Ironworks on Vlad's channel. And also there seems to be a relation with a scene or something in The Visitors from 2016. Or there is also where you can maybe see Antarctica scenes or something like this. I'm not sure I picked this up in your, where I picked this up exactly. But in any case, this could be curious. And I also heard someone saying that in every year when there is footage from this particular location, the snow is always different. But there is apparently a matchup between the snow of the footage we received from the TFE until now and this certain footage from supposedly around 2016, 2017. Yeah, so that's of course something that's interesting. That's something that should be possible to verify by looking at picture and going pixel by pixel or whatever. And then if it really is a very strong matchup, I mean, that at least is incredibly suspicious,
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. And another interesting thing that Q and Fee wrote a comment on one of my channels, and he was talking about, because I was talking about SunCalc data. And then the SunCalc data shows that there is a 24-hour sun in Antarctica at Union Glacier Camp. What's interesting is that at the southernmost part, it's like around 12 degrees, 12.5 degrees. And then as you go to the east, because it's counter rotating, so it goes from the south, east to the north, and to the west and back to the south. So when the sun is located in the northern region, when the sun is rotated, it's like 33 degrees, and then it goes back down to 12 degrees. So it goes from 12 degrees to 33 degrees and back down to 12 degrees. But what's interesting, on the 17th, the day when they left, the sun was at the highest point, 33.66 degrees.
Wow.
If that means anything.
I mean, depends on who you are. Guess the wise will know, or something it says in the Bible.
Does it have to be like this? So just as you're
I feel
saying
like it
that,
has to be like this. That's the other thing I was going to say. It has to. It's not its fault.
so then I'll just briefly say that we had the 33 open theism ideas from Duffy. We have, and I'm just recounting what people are saying, we have the strange brick walls behind certain popular flat earth streamers, which I wish it wasn't such a dumb thing, but I mean, brick by brick, it can mean something, yeah? And the eye symbolism and so on. But then what I want to get at is maybe almost the last thing out of the list is what happened very recently, and you also spoke about, Nach, is the apparently fake call, whereas apparently Witsit claimed to be somebody else and defending himself, which again, because it is so obvious in the voice, and I didn't listen to him that much, but that it is his voice. So either that's a like fancy AI thing or whatever else, which would be the next thing I could think of, like AI voice. But other than that, it raises even more questions and makes this honestly, look even more suspicious. And especially the honest thing I think of when I consider this is I'm really hoping, that no one is under actual duress of any kind. But, given all the circumstantial things,
Seriously,
this cannot be completely excluded. And also that's why, I find it so strange why, fake the vape or whatever, given all the things we discussed. And same thing, why do something like this, which obviously, what optics is this? I'm not sure what to make of it.
Yeah, I mean, let me just go ahead and go first regarding this, because I was suspicious. I mean, I am skeptical in general. Like I'm conspiratory minded or whatever. And when somebody sent me that video, I went through it and I'm just like, holy shit! Like, what the fuck is going on? So we have Vape-gate, we have Mountain Gate, we have Drone Gate, and then we have now Matt-gate. Right, so Matt is the globularist who is calling into an X show, like and then he's basically defending Witsit, and trying to prop up Witsit, from his position, and it's and a lot of people are coming in agreement that saying like, well, that really has like Witsit's like vocabulary plus his cadence. The voice is slightly different, but the way that person is speaking and the words that this person is speaking seems very similar to that of Witsit. Now, I cannot say that that is 100% Witsit, but it seems like that is Witsit, and I'm pretty convinced that is Witsit. Now, one of the things that it's going to do, or what we're going to do, is probably go and compare Witsit's voice and then run it through AI. I'm sure there are AI programs to run voices to see whether the voices match or not, right? And if that person Matt is using a voice changer of some kind or not. I think there are programs to figure that out. And if it is found out that it is like 95 to 99% matching Witsit, he's in really big trouble at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I think that also just to harp on the point that at the beginning of this, I was critical of the lack of testing, but very quickly became suspicious of the people involved, and that's just kind of a bad place to be if you're trying to prove to people that you have a valid recording or you're documenting something. It's not going to make it. It's impossible now for them to be taken seriously as objective, definitive proof. And it's crazy for anyone to pretend that this is somehow a proving test. That's all. And I mean, it's totally great if they want to invite people to investigate with them, to investigate them directly. It just doesn't feel like that's the goal.
One of the one of the adjacent things here, of course, sure, everyone's invited. You can go there for only $31,000, or you can only
Easy.
go for 20K or whatever if you join the marathon. And you
That's
know
a
how that looks
steal.
like.
Huh?
You can
I
watch on
agree.
First Post. So, but then again, what you get a cordoned off area on an ice sheet. I'm like, what is this? And then again, it's always the labeling scam. This is really a recurring theme in any conspiracy. Labeling scam, whether it's food, it doesn't matter. It's a labeling scam. What is Antarctica? It's a big place. You've been on one part of the outer rim. What does that tell me?
Cheesy.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of very like anonymous, not anonymous, a lot of
Anomalous.
anonymous. Yes, very
Anomalous.
anomalous. Excuse me. Thank you. Like it's a lot of really strange shit has happening all at once, you know, and it's hard to come to the like a bottom of it, you know. Like it's like to me, it's like what the fuck? How are we to try to understand all that? It's too much information. Again, it's like more and more diversion that is like being thrown at people to. I don't know. Again, we're talking about it, and maybe we are victims of that because that we are falling into that tactic of having to talk about the shit that's maybe not as relevant, and they want us to be talking about this stuff, and it's like hard not to talk about this kind of stuff at the same time, you know.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's I definitely feel that way too. It's like, what's the point of doing something so shady if it's not just to convince social media to bicker about it, right? Because they know what kind of people are online. I'm sorry, but what kind of idiot is just going to be like, oh, okay, all right, I saw it on TV, I believe it. Not as common as it used to be. 20, 30 years ago, you could get pretty much anybody to do that. Today, it's almost presumed that you're going to get is the opposite. You're going to get a bunch of people arguing over it. So it makes me feel like they have to know that. They have to be doing that on purpose. I could be wrong, but
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the psychological operation has to like kind of conform to the mindset of the people, right? I mean, they can't just do the same thing they did like 50 years ago and say that it's going to pass. I mean, like they have a pulse on the human consciousness and what it wants to look into, what it can look into. And based on that Overton window, they're probably going to formulate something, and they don't expect that 100% of the people are going to be convinced, and I don't know if they can do anything that will convince 100% of the population, but they probably have some numbers that they're working with. It's kind of like a some kind of a percentage number where it's like, oh well, you know, if it's like, let's just come up with a number, 87.77% is going to
right,
be enough of a line for us to get and capture, and then you know the rest will be fighting with each other, the rest will be kind of like you know discredited by the 87.77% of the population, and that's the number we're going for, and this is the way in which we're going to formulate this plan to get that, capture that 87% plus percentage of the population. We don't need to get to 100%. We don't need to even go to the 90%. We just need this figure, you know, as an example, you know.
I mean, that seems kind of like what's going on, but also somehow maybe
Yeah.
it's designed to create. I think also there could be a psychological war where you're getting people to fight with each other, which is also just building engagement anyway. Or it could be that the more people that see the world away, the more impact it has on reality and some sort of voodoo marketing system. I mean, as crazy as that sounds, I feel like the more people that believe a thing, the more that has an impact on our reality. It doesn't necessarily mean the world becomes flat or round or something necessarily. It might mean that, but it could just be that people are destroying each other based on their beliefs. And if enough people believe a thing, then that's all it takes. It doesn't really, how many people are going to actually experience Antarctica? Far less than we'll be talking about it tomorrow. And I think that's a good place for the elite, because then they can have a monopoly on your perspective on reality, right?
Yes. 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 Absolutely. Anything else, Raphael, that you got lined up for us?
Okay, so just, I believe I have mentioned almost everything. The only other thing I briefly want to point out, which is apparently, if I understand correctly, the Flat Earth app which exists. had some potential issues which were pointed out many years ago. And I just want to point out this may also then potentially include some reputation incentive and otherwise why certain people are acting in a certain way. I can't say that, I completely figured this out. Basically, that Dave Wise, from what I understand, has been told there's certain issues with the app, and I'm not sure to what extent he has really properly addressed that to the satisfaction of the critics or whatever. Yeah. And now it may be that also here there's certain models or ideas clashing in a certain way as to why then maybe is more interested in, I don't know, defending certain things. Or maybe he's right. I don't know. But I just want to basically point out we always also have to consider potential financial and other incentive and reputation incentive, which may be intertwined in ways we can't even understand because I don't know those people.
And not
right?
to be like apologetic for Dave, but he's not a programmer. And so obviously he's working more he's a popularist. He's popularizing the idea of flat Earth. And I think on that level, give him a grade of an A+, because a lot of people have heard about flat Earth more because of Dave. But to say that he's some sort of an expert or authority, maybe an expert, I could give him to an extent even, but an authority, he wouldn't pretend. He would not pretend to be an authority on the reality of the flat Earth model. He's busy debunking the lies behind NASA, Operation Fishbowl, and those sorts of things, which again, it really doesn't matter to me so much what you believe, so long as you disbelieve the lies. And I think that's a valuable thing to offer. But yeah, I mean, the app itself, he didn't write it. I don't think we could call him. I don't think I would go as far as to say that the Flat Earth app is a psyop. I think it's just not perfectly designed, and I think we could probably do better. The more that we think about it, the more we could design something that works even better than existed. It's just, you have to imagine 2017, 2018 or something, how freaking useful it is that someone put out a Flat Earth map app, because it was so hard to talk about. It was so suppressed, and it got worse. That was about the time that BBC was saying, careful, help, people are watching YouTube instead of legacy media. What are we going to do? And they're believing the excuse that why would you have to stop social media? Flat Earth. That was a big explanation for why we had to stop social media. Why CNN was to be trusted, because you knew that they were never going to say anything about Flat Earth. It's very particular, that point.
Yeah. Go ahead, Rafael.
Yes, I generally and honestly, like I said initially also, I always ideally only want to talk positive about everyone. And also I heard, presentations by him. I heard many people that got introduced to the whole concept through him and through the app. I think that's all great. The only issue is then, again, maybe, I can't say if that's true or not, but if you build a reputation maybe and then tie it to a certain model, then it's always a question, are you then open enough to open it up again or whatever? All I understand is that, if I recount this correctly, Naj, please correct me, that the correct thing it shows is basically where the sun is above, but that there are certain other factors which just don't match up. And it may even be because we literally don't have the model for it yet, but I understand certain aspects maybe could be integrated. And here the whole point I would be asking is just not to push it under the rug, because I already made this and this is how it looks, yeah. But then be like, well, you can open new tabs on the app and have 5 variants which approximate whatever we are seeing, right? So, but yeah, I'm not the one developing the app, so I'm not the one to complain. But I think you see what I'm saying, not to get shoehorned into something then only because there's momentum built, but actually remain open and in search of the best model possible, however you want to put it.
Yeah, well, the app is kind of working like a broken clock, where even a broken clock is correct twice a day. Right.
Yeah.
And so the app is correct in terms of noon, right? So the noon location for the way it's working is that the sun and the moon is going around like a clock, and it's over the AE map. And then so if it's hitting noon in different locations, then that is correct. But that is all that is correct for. So the noontime is it, so but as far as the app is concerned, they had like a data leak. It's been hacked, and then so with the so people's
now
emails,
who's into that. Yeah.
People's emails, people's locations, their addresses, whatever information that was shared or placed into the app is basically leaked for the public. Okay, 120,000 plus. So this is something that Jaren kind of brought out, which is kind of funny because I covered it like the day it happened, and then a week later, that FTFE and what's his name, McToons, they were having a long discussion about it. I covered it again then, and after like a week later, like 8 days later, Dave Weiss decided to do something about it. So I guess a programmer was sent to him by certain groups to try to plug up the holes. Now, did they do a good job? I have no idea because I'm not part of the app. I don't download that app. But what's interesting about this, since we're talking about the app, both Jaren and Witsit have the app. The app tells you, because every individual who has the app, and then if you turn on your location, you have the blue dot. Now, some reports that I have gotten from people is that why wasn't Jaren and Witsit's blue dot available on the Dave Weiss's app? Now that is something to look into, right?
Well,
Like,
wasn't
is
it
it
possible
true?
for anyone to turn off you just had to turn on and off your location services for the app, right?
Sure, but
So if you
they, yeah,
hadn't
yeah,
turned it
yeah.
on, it wouldn't automatically work. Like for me, I had to say accept while app is on,
Sure.
or so people would have had to turn on the location
Well,
data. I mean, I
yeah, yeah,
agree
yeah,
though that
yeah,
they
yeah,
weren't
yeah.
very careful. They definitely weren't
No,
careful,
no, no.
and they're
N-
yeah.
No. I agree with you about turning it on and off, but wouldn't you want to turn it on and leave it on, right? And then you're going to Antarctica, right? And then
Yeah.
that's like your friend, like
Of
before
all people at
uh,
all time, that should be the
they were
moment it's on.
already. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like they're already business partners with each other, and they're all promoting each other, and there was no like a pushback from Jaren or Dave until they came back. After
It's
they came
suspicious.
back, Dave started to say, "Well, it's fake," and blah 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 blah. And Jaren is upset about the fact that like Dave is saying that. So there's a little bit of a kind of a drama that's happening with all that. But prior to going to TFE, they're all kosher with each other. They're all good with each other. So why wouldn't you keep that on and show everybody, hey, look, we're showing up on the app, and then we're in
Right.
Antarctica according to it.
Yeah. Shady.
Yes, and just one thing I want to add is at the same time, if this is an operation, shouldn't it have enough budget to do a believable GPS spoofing or whatever this app is using?
True.
That shouldn't
Yeah,
be
you
so
should be able to
expensive.
do that anyway.
Honestly.
However, you could also imagine that there'd be mistakes made. I mean, the app, I don't know. Yeah, it's not a very it's not a very advanced app. It should be something that you could spoof. I agree. So, but the idea that they didn't, it's also, are they doing that just to make you feel like you can't trust them? And then the idea of what's the value to doing that? Is it just that these are kind of audience that it's a demographic, and if you have all of their emails, you think you can exploit them better because you can sell them devices that clean the airwaves around them, and all these placebo effect devices that you could probably sell to 160,000 people. I'm trying to think of the most Occam's razor reason why you would pigeonhole and try to find these kinds of people. But it might be like, okay, well, they're super easy. They just don't believe the official narrative. So all I have to do is sell them the anti-narrative and they'll buy it. It could be that this is all part of some sort of a investigative effort to research a market, and that we're a market. I mean, as screwed up as that is, that could be the simplest explanation for this.
Yeah. I don't know, man. There's too much crap to go through. just too much, like it's just like my brain is starting to fry a little bit about what is true and what is not true, and maybe that was the whole point.
How hard is it to you to like just live in a world where it could be both at the same time too? Because that's the other thing. I feel like in the 90s and early 2000s, it was a lot more what the bleep do we know? And people were far more into the electric universe theory than they were into like what shape the world really is. Are you on the back of a turtle? I feel like maybe we're backtracking a certain level, because from what we understand about quantum physics or physics even, pretty much everything is happening simultaneously. The world being a globe and the world being flat is just a way of looking at energy being collected, right? Or is that
Well,
no?
Well, not the way I perceive it, not to me anyway, because like water always finds its level, and I think there's demonstrable physics that's involved with the nature of reality that shows what kind of place that we're living in, and to come to the position that it can be a globe and flat at the same time, that doesn't seem like it can hold water to me. Not to
So
me
I think
anyway. Not
because this is not uninteresting. Sorry, um, I agree with you, Nachiketa, and to some extent with you, Andreas. So the
Oh, very
what is
political.
it? Which yeah, of course. Which shape is it? So what I could imagine is that optically and like you say, energy and so on creates certain patterns, looks a certain way from a certain distance and things like that. Maybe even a large flat surface from a large enough distance looks like a whatever. I don't know about these things. So that's one thing I could imagine. But where we have physical reality to the extent that we can experience it, like with airplanes and so on, or with architects and so on, from what I understand, none of them actually ever account for a curvature. So from that point of view, if we build it like from the ground up, like practically speaking, who is actually using that principle? You see what I'm saying? And I don't think no one's using it. I mean, NASA has this flat, non-rotating stationary Earth. Who is using any practical application engineering where they need to account for curvature? Is there any?
I think in general, like when you look at anything, any explosion or any difference quotient, there's this curve that a curve of entropy which occurs, right? And that's pi. And so pi is used to define any sort of space, right? Because you're saying this is the space forward to its high point. Let's say you throw a ball, the ball goes up to its highest point, and then it starts to come back down, and it's following this natural progression in the difference quotient of pi. So that is also, I sent you a video, Nachiketa, that's showing in a flat plane having a kilogram versus 1,000 or gram versus a kilogram interacting with clicks, where it bounces into it like two hockey pucks that are bouncing into each other. And the amount of times when they hit the wall and bounce into each other ends up being some pattern of 3.14159 or 31415.7 or 45. Every time it's a pi based curve, and it's not actually even a curve that you're visually seeing. It's just the number of a curve. It's the representative of a curve, because here, let me show you actually, just I'm not explaining it as clearly as I wish I was. Here you've got these two balls, right? A kilogram, or these two squares, a kilogram and a million kilograms. And when one hits the other, you can see bounce, 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 bounce. This is, by the way, 3 blue, 1 brown. Bounce, 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 bounce. You get 3.14. Here it comes. Boom, 3.14. And you can do this again multiple times. And every time you use a larger weight, you'll get a more precise version of pi in the number of collisions that are happening. So you're not actually seeing a curve on a flat plane, but you're experiencing a curve from pi. And I think this is the kind of math that we need to look at to understand why you can be both experiencing reality as a non-local energy body field, as a holographic universe, or as some sort of spheroid reality. And this is what people used to talk about. I feel like 10, 15 years ago was a lot more common because of the what the bleep do we know, metaphysical Kabbalah reality. That was what everyone was already obsessing about. And I think that's where the globe comes from anyway, because the globe isn't some scientific idea. It's a spiritual, psychic, esoteric idea that comes out of the same people that brought theosophy and Madame Blavatsky and Freemasonry. This idea that the forward leads to backwards is a very metaphysical concept. And it makes sense. There's no reason that we have to abandon it. You can still believe in that, at least on a spiritual level, right? NASA could be a spiritual thing, and I would be fine with it. But to pretend that it's, so important that the world is flat, I don't know if it's actually true, because we know that the universe is a flat plane from what we understand about quantum space-time. This is what space-time foam that's expanding in every direction, and we're having projections of holographic reality. This is what Michael Tabbitt talked about in the holographic universe in 1995 or something. So it just I think we're constantly coming back to that idea that it doesn't really matter. Not really, because you could be some sort of a being that is radio programmed to experience everything as a flat plane or as some sort of a curvature because of the law of what's it called? Singularity? No, it's another law. It's another paradox. Where things come together. I forget the word for it now.
Parallax again?
No.
Things come together.
Yeah, things come from together. It's entanglement, from the laws of entanglement, right? So that everything that we're experiencing seems like distance is actually a perspective of frequency, and everything is frequently at the same point, depending on its orbital frequency. So we're experiencing this radio reality, and then we're calling that this material form that we experience. I tend to believe that more than I believe that we're solid objects, that we're just always this way. I don't think that that's exactly true.
How would you describe holographic universe? What would be the best way to try to explain that concept to somebody?
Here, let me pull up this picture. Maybe I like this one. Okay, so here you see Saturn and Jupiter, right? And their projections coming from this flat plane that we're existing on. So you might be down here. In fact, so is Saturn and so is Jupiter. We're all down here, but we're looking up. It's like looking at a projection. You're experiencing a projection of space and time, because time is this sort of distance in and of itself, right? And it's all happening right here, but we're experiencing this holographic reality. And there's more to it, because the way a hologram works is that if you were to cut a hologram, then you just have a copy of that universe, essentially. So the multiverse could be some sort of shattering of the holographic universe as well. And yeah, I would say like read Michael Tabbitt's holographic universe from the 90s and see if that's something that jives with you. You know, it might be something that you think of as more realistic. It's interesting to me because it answers a lot of questions people have about space, because the idea of outer space isn't really viable with NASA's descriptions of the moon existing in our atmosphere already anyway. But flat earthers tend to completely dismiss all of outer space, which is dangerous, I think, because
just briefly, I'm not sure if Natch was aware of this with the moon in outer space. Did we talk about this yesterday already? I'm not sure, but maybe just briefly mention this, or moon within the atmosphere. I'm not sure if that's even contentious now or not, but just briefly.
Yeah, I think at this point it's pretty well accepted that the moon is within our atmosphere. NASA, when we were talking about it years ago, I mean, I had in school always learned this, but a lot of people were saying no. And I'm like, yeah. And finally, there's just public knowledge information about this, that the moon actually reaches, the Earth's atmosphere reaches around the moon. The moon's within our atmosphere. And so for a long time, people used to think that the moon was outside of the atmosphere, basically. I would meet people all the time.
Do you think that the moon is a physical object, Andreas?
So I tend to believe that. I know people that don't. I know a lot of people that think that things are just like lights shining out of volcanoes and refraction and everything like that. I'm actually really interested in volcanic astronomy. The idea that so much of what we're experiencing is from projections from the Earth is interesting to me. It makes sense. I think a lot of meteors are projectiles from volcanoes, but I do think that the solar disks are probably actually solar disks. The idea of some sort of a celestial satellite system. I mean, Raphael and I were watching some Disney Man in Space documentary that came out in the 50s a few days ago, 1951. We were watching this video about, it has Werner von Braun and Willie May and all of these important paperclip Thule Society Skull SS officer scientists. Pretty great stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think that for the most part, their obsession with the Vedas, that most of these nuclear scientists, even into Oppenheimer, talking about I am death, reading from the Mahabharata, and most of them believed in Vedic astronomy, at least esoterically. And so from the Vedic perspective, they're not just projections, they're actually solar disks. And the moon isn't just a reflection of the sunlight. It's its own kind of negative solar disk, the lunar disk that cools. So the hot sun heating and then the cool moon cooling, I think is an interesting, I mean, I tend to believe that more than they're just projections, right? However, there's also some weird stuff about that. The idea that space right now is some sort of a veil, and that we're just experiencing a false space because we're not allowed to see outside of this space. I'm interested in that too. I would not be surprised one bit if there's all sorts of technology being used to shield us from seeing outside of our atmosphere, whatever that means, outside of the firmament, because you could project onto the firmament as well. So
Let me ask you a question about gravity. Have you ever thought about gravity,
yeah, I
Andreas?
don't tend to believe in gravity, right? I
What do you
tend to
think is
believe,
happening?
the same thing that everything else experiences, the same Newtonian laws, density, buoyancy. I think density and buoyancy seem to explain most of the ideas that gravity is supposed to explain. Gravity seems like a really weird racist concept. It's like the man's keeping you down. You know what I mean? It's just this weird, like, come on, like, have a little self-faith. And also, just how weird is this idea that we're bats, like upside down, hanging from the ceiling all the time, and there's just gravity, man, just keeping you down. I don't know. I don't love the idea.
Yeah, well, I mean, so density and buoyancy are kind of interesting concepts. And my understanding about density is that different materials are of this different densities, right? So buoyancy would be that different materials, well, different densities would fall into a density gradient of some sort, correct? So uh, the level earthers, would categorize you as a RDD believer. And what RDD is, relative density disequilibrium, is the terminology that we use. Basically, if you are a stationary flat, well, the globies believe in gravity, but nobody explains gravity, so we throw that out the window. The flat earthers, the stationary flat earthers, believe in two things, which is static electricity, and the fancy way of saying that is called incoherent dielectric acceleration. But the other thing is called buoyancy, and buoyancy is also another fancy way of saying that is the relative density disequilibrium. But the idea is the same. So a lot of people, they say, well, things just go down because that's what they do. It's like, if you drop a rock inside of a water, it drops to the bottom because it wants to go down to the bottom, because that's what until it finds its equilibrium, until it finds its same density. Otherwise, it keeps on dropping until it finds a medium in which that is equal to. Okay, that's the idea. The upward vector, which I am a part of, we say that the motion causes motion, right? And the reason being is of a simple idea of an accelerometer. Now, you know what an accelerometer is, right, Andreas? You've
Yeah.
seen it. You know how they operate. There's usually like a one large mechanism outside or a smaller mechanism inside, and then because they are fluctuating, right? And then that is registered into a computer, and it knows like how fast it's fluctuating, and thus it's like telling you how fast some object is moving. There's an acceleration. So a simplest accelerometer could be a water bottle. There's liquid inside a water bottle, and can you move this water bottle 30 feet in 1 second without displacing the water and the gas that's in here? Do you think you're able to do it? Are you able to accelerate this water bottle 30 feet in 1 second without displacing the water inside? What do you think?
Yeah, I think you can, right? I mean, you
Yeah?
mean like the water stays inside of the container is all you're asking,
No,
right?
no, no,
Because
no. No.
you want the water to
Ima-
stay at the base of the container, or
yeah, yeah. Like in any orientation that you have it, let's say like the water is like this is half full with water.
okay.
Can I move this water bottle in any direction, 360 degrees, without this water displacing?
Uh, I don't know. I feel like I feel like there would be a way to counter the force in order to do it. Am I wrong? Tell me what the answer is. I'm not sure I know.
As far as I'm concerned, the answer is no.
Okay.
Level-headed Natalie is correct that you cannot move this water bottle with the water inside and not displace it. It must be
Okay.
displaced. This displacing of the water, it always occurs with the movement. Okay,
So
except
even if you have extreme pressure and everything, you're saying,
well, okay, so like, are you saying that if you filled it with water inside and then you pressurized it and put enough gas pressure inside of this water bottle, do you think the water inside will not displace then
I
at
think
that
it's
point?
still. I think even then, probably it will in motion. Liquid in motion does displace. I will. Yeah, I'll accept
Yeah.
that.
Okay, so let's all agree to the fact that you cannot move an accelerometer, the simplest one with water bottle, right, in any direction without displacing the water.
Right.
However, what happens when you drop the water bottle? What happens when you drop the water bottle?
The water stays or displaces very little, or not. I mean, not if you would drop it perfectly, maybe it wouldn't displace at
Yep.
all. If you
Yeah.
drop it perfectly.
Ah, so if you drop the water bottle, then the water remains at the bottom because in any other direction, what happens to displacement is that the lighter material, which is the air, right, compared to the heavier material, which is the water, the lighter material always goes into the same direction as the motion. So if I am moving the water like this way, right, the air will be going in the same direction that I am pushing it, and the water will be
Mhm.
going in the opposite direction. That's what occurs 100% of the time, except when I drop it. Now, the question then becomes, why is it and how is it that I am able to move this 30 feet a second? That's like 9.8 meters, 10 meters, 10 meters a second drop. How is it possible that I can drop this and move this 32 feet in a second? I mean, that's some kind of a movement without having this water displace at all. What do you think?
Relativity because it's inside of the container, or no? What's the reason?
The reason the upward vector people believe is that actually everything, you, the table, the chair, everything is moving upwards at a constant
Right.
speed.
Yeah.
We're moving
Relativity. Yeah.
all upwards at a constant. So what happens is that when I drop this cup, the water remains inside of it. Like, well, it has to have a containment on top of it. But when I drop it, that the water stays at the bottom is because it is decelerating. It's no longer accelerating, it's decelerating. So we were all moving up together, and then when you drop something, it is reducing in terms of speed compared to the others. So it's not that it is accelerated to the ground, it is decelerating to the ground. And so thus it is just losing momentum. Okay? Losing
Makes
momentum.
sense.
And that is
Makes good sense.
so yeah. So that is the reason why a lot of us know that the upward vector to be of existence. And if you adhere to the idea that the upward vector is the cause of what we call gravitas, Andreas. So, like the gravitas, what we know as gravitas is not there's a pulling motion into the ground, but there's actually an upward movement of the ground that is causing gravity to occur. You cannot possibly equate that or place that idea onto a globe because the globe has to be expanding infinitely in order to match that to happen. So it debunks the globe model completely and it debunks the stationary Earth model completely.
Interesting. I was thinking about it, not debunking it, because you know how much of the globe model and the idea of space is that we're moving forward, and so I could see how that would be connected too. But when you think about it, the way you, by definition, a globe has to be going in every direction. So there would be equal and opposite force from all angles. So it wouldn't allow for the globe to be moved. You're right. It has to be kind of spinning directly upwards for that to mean. Well, I guess I don't know. I want to look at some models of the polar. Universal expansion is supposed to be that the things are moving, spinning around each other, and I don't know. I have to think about that a little bit more. Just the idea that we're being held by other satellites as well for gravity. And yeah, gravity is not something that's super well explained, but it seems to be just an excuse to make sense of why this can happen. Exactly what you're talking about. The idea that things are moving forward is definitive.
Yeah, I mean, we can do a whole talk about it at some point. We don't have to go through it all today. I mean, obviously, it took me a little while to wrap my mind around it, and it does require kind of a deprogramming of what we know about physics. But once we start to go into it, you will see that this is demonstrable, and we have
Mhm.
multiple demonstrations to show how it is all working, and that the idea of weight and buoyancy is a result of this upward vector, the motion. Like this water loses all buoyancy. Like buoyancy is that I can, there's water inside of this cup. I can put a marshmallow in there, and the marshmallow will float because there's buoyancy in this water. But it's not that the water is in itself is buoyant. It's the motion of the earth pushing that whole because
Mm.
it's connected to me and I'm connected to this chair and that this chair is connected to this house and this house is connected to the ground and everything is moving upwards all together. But as soon as I let go of this water, that marshmallow will be no longer buoyant. It cannot be. Okay.
That
So
poor
buoyancy is
marshmallow.
a result. Yeah, the buoyancy is a result of motion. It's not a force in itself.
Yeah, I agree with that. That makes sense. I'd love
Great.
to, yeah, I
That's
definitely look
awesome.
forward to looking more into this. What did you call
Yeah,
this? It's called
upward
uh
vector.
upward vector.
Yeah. So you can I have in my channel and then I can share, Xcreate 200 here. He has a lot of demonstration. Level-headed William has a lot of demonstration. Um, Beyond the imaginary curve, Dell has a lot of demonstrations, and I'm going to compile a lot of them and share them on my channel as well into a playlist. So it's something that would be good to look into because it's objective reality. You know.
Hmm. Very cool. Very interesting.
So,
Yeah.
whatever ultimate model or differentiation comes out of it, I think it's great. Anyone who can do any type of experiments and experimentations, I could start to imagine it now that you explained it. I heard you talk about it several times, and I was thinking to myself, oh, I'll get into it when it's the time, right? But definitely, I also want to, learn more about it for sure. Like
Hmm. Hmm.
any of that seems interesting, especially like you said, which is the big debate always, who actually has something they really can repeat and demonstrate, right? Where you don't need to go to some faraway island to come up with something. That's always important, right? What are
Right.
things you can recreate yourself? And aside from that, and this is not a scientific idea at all, but I have some sympathy towards the terms or whatever, because don't they always say like we are all rising up, consciousness is rising or whatever? Maybe it's meant in a
Yep.
different way. There's songs about this and so on. I don't claim to know, but I definitely want to learn more about this and understand more, and then hopefully we can figure out together a better model of reality than whatever is being offered to us up to this point.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, is there anything else that you guys want to touch on before we start winding it down?
I think I'm through everything that I had on my list. Thank you very
Hmm.
much. Andreas, do you have anything that you want to mention or bring up?
No, I got to complain about the freaking people doing the test, and I mean, I'm harping on. I hope people see the Dubé video a bit as well, and look into. I'll look into what Nachiketa's got on the upward vector, so that I know more about that, because that sounds really fascinating as well. I think there's enough interesting information out there that just because they make some crap propaganda video that upsets us doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of amazing things we can research. There's a lot of things we can research about this, and we can know slightly more about this than we would think just from being not in Antarctica. But I think that that's fine for what we're trying to do in terms of actually looking at what is possible. And there's no way that we could be lying to you by showing you fake footage, because we're just going to be critically analyzing these theories. So I think this is probably a better use of time.
Then there is one last thing practical, maybe to tie it all together, hopefully on a positive note. One comment I saw was someone saying, oh, Nach, please hold Will Duffy's feet to the fire, all these nice analogies, in terms of the force to line experiment. Maybe that's the last thing to mention.
Yeah.
Also, just Andreas, what do you think about this, or how this should be done from your point of view?
Like
Because
I said, I want to use lasers to do it. That's basically it.
Mhm. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
just to keep people entertained and something else to fundraise for, God knows.
No, I mean, like, that's the thing. All this technology is out there already. They have to be using it in order to be doing unidirectional laser Wi-Fi, like Li-Fi, the Google Li-Fi system that's getting internet all over the, like, from not quite satellite. I think they're just balloons, right? But they're at the high altitude balloons. That should be enough. You don't need to pay or buy anything to do this. Google, if they really wanted to let you know this, could let you know this. There's all of the infrastructure in place so that you could see what's true. And that we're being lied to is the only possible explanation, other than we're not being told everything, because there's a value in having a monopoly of information. The more you don't know, the more they know, the better off the exploiter is than the exploited.
yeah. So regarding the Force the Line, Will Duffy was interviewed by Dell beyond the imaginary curve, and he basically agreed with Dell that he wants to do this experiment, Force the Line. The Force the Line idea is that you have a plumb, that goes straight up and down perpendicular, and then you use a level to make a horizontal line, and you just continue that line outwards using material, to go as far as you can, like 3 miles or 5 miles. And then if there is curvature, there should be a distance between this line, that is physically seen. But some people say, well, there's because of the Canterbury effect of, like, ropes, how you can tie a rope to a ship, to an whatever, like a dock, and then it has that kind of like a bow to it. But that bow would be always going downwards. It would never be curving upwards, because, like, the other direction would be going. So so that's the idea of forcing the line. When I interviewed Will Duffy, he also said that if I can get 50 flat earthers together, and then and we come up with an agreement about the force the line, that he would fund it. So I have that on record that he would fund it, but
Oh,
I
that's
don't think
cool.
he's going to follow through. I don't think he's going to follow through on it, because I sent him an email to get another interview out of him before going to Antarctica, and he basically told me, like, what is there to talk about? So, I mean, we both know what we are. I'm a level earther. I'm a conspiratory minded guy. I know who he is. Also, I think most everybody in this community know who Will Duffy is, and he played a great game. I applaud him because I'm a chess player, and I know when the players are a good player in chess or not. And then if they would kick your ass in the game of chess or poker, they kicked your ass. They could be a good person, or they don't have to be a good person, but the game is the game, so we have to understand that. So that's it, I guess.
Yeah.
Any thoughts that you guys want to share before well, we call it an evening?
Let's just do force the line, but with lasers in the sky. Just gonna harp on that point.
Yeah, well, the people will say that lasers in the sky is optical, and there could be some diffraction involved with lasers and stuff like this. So, that's why a lot of
You can
people.
tell if there's a change. Lasers are so specific, you can tell if there's any refraction of the light because it's actual focused par density. So you would know if there's any change to that laser, if there's any curving or anything, all that can be measured. And so that's why it's the most practical thing. It's something that can't be an optical illusion, right? That's the beauty of a laser test. And you can do it so high up that it can't be affected by the ocean, like water vapor refraction and all the crap that they use to explain things. Usually you can just avoid that. You can circumvent that issue.
Do you know how far, like, military grade lasers, because they use lasers for targeting, right? Like when they target, like, a battleship to another ship, they use like a laser targeting system in order to, like, it's kind of like a rangefinder, right? Like you are trying to figure out, like, what the distance of an object is. Do you know how far those lasers go from ship to ship?
I
No.
mean, I know that they can go like 5 to 10 miles at least. I'm not sure exactly the furthest that
I've
they've
heard
gone.
I've heard it goes up to like 70 miles plus. I've
Yeah,
heard.
well, so theoretically, if the moon is real, right? Like, or the distance that they say they've shined a laser to the moon and back. So that's
Yeah.
if that were real, that would be 384,000 miles. You know what I mean, or something like
Well,
that.
more because it's well, yeah, it's 300 and well, it's 240,000 miles ish, right? And then you have to
384,400 kilometers. Sorry.
yeah, but
And then back.
that's just one distance and back, right? So it has to be
Yeah.
nearly 500,000 miles that you're talking about, 480,000 miles. So
Yeah. And if you were to shine, so the other point of this is like you're shining a laser and something is picking up the signal of the laser that knows whether it's the full, unadulterated, unidirectional directed light. If it's 532 nanometers, it will still be 532 nanometers unless there's some refraction. And then you're getting less light. So you'll say, okay, it's 400 nanometer power density. You'll see the color changes, but even so much as that a machine can pick it up, you will know if there's even a slight loss of signal. This is how technology works in general. You'd be able to use data, except that there's some sort of like a error, a corruption of the signal, right? So this is something that's really practical. It's not just something that is an interesting thing to look up for flat earthers. This is the necessary technology that Google would need, or the military would need, if they want to have direct communication with these astronauts on the moon. You know, like they need this stuff if this is true. So it's not crazy to ask them to do it.
well, what about rail guns? I mean, how far do you think rail guns can operate?
Rail guns that are shooting bullets or photons, or what kind of rail gun?
I thought they just shot like a dense object
So
through like a.
there are photon railguns too. They don't have to just be bullets. You know, so a photon
Okay.
railgun would theoretically in a vacuum, you know, they can go pretty far, which you can create a vacuum. So let's say that you do have some sort of a projectile, and the projectile's job is really just to burn the oxygen in front of the photon cannon. So it shoots out, it burns the oxygen, creating a vacuum that dissipates almost instantly, because as soon as you blow up the oxygen, something else fills that place. But in the time it takes for you to do that, you've burned a perfect vacuum ahead of a laser. So the laser's traveling without any sort of entropy through a vacuum, right? There's all sorts of crazy things. I mean, once they start talking about military technology, they're willing to try anything. So that's what's funny about the flat earth tests. Like, oh yeah, what's the point? It's like, well, pretty sure you wasted your money on weirder stuff, you know?
Yeah. So I mean, do you know the curvature model? Do you know how big the globe is, and Andreas?
I mean, I forget off the top of my head, but at some point they did beat it into me in school, you know? But I don't remember.
Yeah. The radius is like something like 4,000 miles. It's not exactly 4,000 miles. It's like 3,957 miles or something like that. It's like nearly 4,000 miles, the radius. So the diameter is like, let's just say 8,000 miles. So 8,000 miles times by 3.14 is the circumference, right? So it roughly comes out to about 25,000 miles, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, so the circumference of the Earth is around 25,000 miles. So a 6 foot tall man can see out to 3 miles of horizon. So the curvature math is like eight inches per mile squared. So the first mile it drops 8 inches. Second mile it drops, I think, 32 inches. And then the third mile it drops like 64 inches or something like that. Whatever 6 foot is, right? So well, it's 72 inches. 72 inches, 6 feet, right? So it goes on and on and on. So it's like 100 miles. There's like 666 feet, 6,666 feet of curvature, something to that effect, for 100 miles, right? So there's a math to the curvature model. You know, just like the tilt of the Earth is like 23.4 degrees, which leaves you 66.6 degrees left over on the 90-degree tilt. You know, the tilt of the Earth, according to the globe model, and the fact that we're, like rotating around the sun at 66,600 miles an hour. I mean, it's like pretty wild. All these sixes showing up, I mean, it's pretty crazy.
You've maybe seen Scott Onstott's Secrets in Plain Sight, where he talks about all the measurements. Have you seen that doc?
Mm-mm.
I'd recommend it because it's weird because it starts out with him talking about, you know, Washington D.C. and Stonehenge and things like that. But as he gets bigger and bigger, it's because you can think, okay, yeah, for sure, somebody designed Stonehenge. I get that, but how can it be that these numbers are so esoteric and specific when we're talking about celestial bodies, right?
Mhm.
Who built that? And it just becomes very interesting how synchronistic and you know, sacred those numbers are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think there's a lot that we need to, you know, kind of look at from different directions, you know, and then I think we're kind of seeing reality from different perspectives, but that's fine. You know, we meet where we can meet, and that's what these conversations are about. It's just trying to find a meeting point in terms of like, you know, how we perceive reality, how we understand and decode reality. So I appreciate you guys being here today, and I'm glad that we were able to talk about the things that we talked about. So I hope to have more conversations in the future, and I hope you guys have a happy New Year, right? That's
You as
coming around
well.
in yeah, a couple days. So enjoy your time over there in Europe. So have fun
Thank you. What's it called?
and get some rest.
Sylvester? Guten Sylvester. Frohe Sylvester.
Guten Rutsch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Guten
Best.
Rutsch.
That's the New Year.
Yes.
Guten-
Guten Rutsch. And Rutsch means like when you're sliding down like a slide or something, you know?
Mhm.
You know? So Guten Rutsch is like have a good slide well into the next year. That's kind of like a German way to say it.
Nice.
Guten
Yes.
Rutsch. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Guten Rutsch, right?
Rutsch. Yes.
Guten Rutsch.
Yes. Very good.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. All right, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And then I will talk to you guys soon and have a good year. And we'll see you guys next year.
Yeah. See you soon.
Awesome. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.